100 years ago, humanity, having uncovered the secrets of space, invented teleportation technology and opened a portal to unknown worlds, hoping for great discoveries. But behind the portal lurked not allies, but terrifying monsters whose nightmarish forms and ferocious power terrified the people. Humanity's weapons, from machine guns to tanks, proved powerless against these invulnerable creatures from another dimension. The portal, created with hope, has become an uncontrollable threat that cannot be closed, pushing humanity to the brink of extinction. One day, a soldier, in despair, swallowing the flesh of a defeated monster, unexpectedly made a discovery that changed the fate of humanity. His body began to mutate, acquiring unprecedented abilities, and thus humanity found the key to survival: adaptation through enemies. The only way to salvation is to hunt animals, devour their flesh and absorb their souls, appropriating their power for evolution. A century of bloody battles and merging with the souls of beasts gave birth to a new humanity, whose strength grew with each hunt in this merciless world. Only continuous evolution and the hunt for monsters gave people a chance to survive in a world called the Refuge of the Gods, where survival became the highest law. The young warrior Han Sen rushed forward, saving his life, his heart beating in panic, because his strength, developed over a month, was still weak. His pursuers, armed with blades and fury, chased after him, and every step Han Sen took seemed like his last in this deadly game. Fate made him an outcast. Having stolen the souls of animals, he became a target for the locals, whose thirst for revenge was as great as their greed for power. Swinging his axe, he fought back desperately, knowing that the stolen soul of the beast was his only chance to survive in this cruel world. A dishonorable act? But in the refuge of the gods, where evolution and survival are the only laws, morality gives way to the instinct of self-preservation. It was all or nothing. If the pursuers caught up with Han Sen, their blades would mercilessly pierce him, leaving no chance for salvation. Gritting his teeth without looking back, he rushed forward, and drops of sweat like tears of fate flowed down his face, reflecting a furious desire for life. A month ago, he stepped into this refuge, which at first glance beckoned with its heavenly beauty, but concealed mysteries ready to destroy his hopes. On his 18th birthday, he was brought here, and looking at the shining beauty ahead, he dreamed that the whole world was as beautiful and serene. In reality, the refuge of the gods is a treacherous place full of dangers, and Han Sen ended up here against his will, becoming the breadwinner of the family after the death of his father. After finishing school, in his desperate situation, this refuge became one of the best but risky paths to a new life full of unknown challenges. As he watched the warrior walk proudly past, he noticed the armor of the spirit beast, whose mystical beauty ignited in him a burning desire to possess the same power. Suddenly he froze, feeling a sharp pain in his eye. A yellow glow began to appear after the fight with the monster. It tormented him, foreshadowing something ominous. This pain, like an invisible enemy, had been haunting Han Sen for a long time, depriving him of peace, and he was at a loss to guess what kind of curse was hidden in his body. As he turned the corner, he froze, seeing a huge white beast, like a wolf, whose fur glowed like stars in the shadow of the ancient walls of the shelter. The hero was amazed how this formidable monster, like a ghost, entered the city in broad daylight, disturbing the fragile peace of the sacred refuge. Enraged by the audacity of the monster that had sneaked into the city, the boy gripped the hilt of his blade tightly and, with a furious glare, rushed into battle, ready to crush the enemy. He rushed forward with lightning speed, pointing the sharp blade straight at the monster, hoping to interrupt its ominous tread through the streets with one blow. The dagger sank into the tough white fur on the beast's back, but surprisingly, it did no serious damage, only slightly scratching its impenetrable skin. Passers-by who noticed the fight froze in amazement, their eyes widening at the sight of the young man attacking the she-wolf. The beast shook from the impact, letting out a roar, and clouds of white smoke, intertwined with streams of magical light, swirled around it. Suddenly, the she-wolf turned into a beautiful girl, and the dagger, to the young man's horror, pierced her thigh, causing a cry of pain to echo across the square. Beads of sweat broke out on Han Sen's forehead, his teeth clenched in horror, as he realized that his fatal mistake had turned the battle into an irreparable tragedy. The outraged townspeople surrounded the young man, showering him with angry reproaches for daring to stab Qin Xuan, their beloved heroine, with a dagger. The first time he encountered such a transformation, the boy learned that the she-wolf was Qin Xuan, the most influential girl in the steel armor shelter. The people around, barely holding back their laughter at the absurdity of the situation, made fun of Qin Xuan, whose pride was wounded by the absurd blow to such a sensitive spot. The warrior was burning with rage, her eyes were burning with fire, and her voice was trembling with anger. How dare this insolent man touch her, offending her honor and dignity? An enraged crowd of men surrounded the offender, showering him with threats and curses, demanding retribution for insulting their goddess, whose fame thundered everywhere. One of the men, unable to contain his anger, kicked the young man hard, causing him to stagger in pain and humiliation in the face of an angry crowd of townspeople. The young man, unable to keep his balance, fell to his knees, feeling the crowd's gaze burning into him and shame and fear gripping his heart before the inevitable punishment. Kneeling before the girl, the newcomer listened to her angry speech, where every word hit like a whip, condemning him to eternal persecution in the shelter society. There was a blaze of despair in his eyes, mixed with a bitter sense of defeat, like a smoldering fire dying out under the onslaught of hopelessness. A crowd of angry men showered him with furious threats and harsh abuse, and at that moment he clearly realized that his days were numbered and hope was melting away like smoke in the wind. He clutched his head and screamed in agony, tears streaming down his face like a river, carrying his pain and fear into a bottomless pit of despair. Screaming in excruciating agony, he desperately tried to escape the nightmare, clinging to the fragile hope that it was just a dream that would melt away with the first rays of dawn. Leaving the bustling city and finding himself at a rocky mountain stream, he decided to let off some steam, allowing his anger and fatigue to dissolve in the cold spray of the stream. With furious rage he dealt with the beetles, cursing fate and everything that had happened, as if every blow could erase his pain and bring back what was lost. The young man mercilessly gutted the black beetles one by one, tearing their flesh with grim determination, as if devouring the very essence of their existence. Having already destroyed the 30th beetle, the hero, looking at the data, realized with annoyance that the gene points were no longer growing, and his efforts were drowning in emptiness. Everything was happening agonizingly slowly for Han Sen, and he was tormented by the thought that at this rate, his dream of the first evolution would remain unattainable. He realized that the lower flesh of these creatures had little effect on evolution, like a grain of sand thrown into the bottomless ocean of his ambitions. The hero considered hunting more formidable monsters, but the bitter truth that his strength was insufficient shackled him like the chains of a past defeat. Remembering how he once challenged a stronger opponent, he almost died, unable to defeat even a weak Coppertooth, which still burned his soul. Having suffered severe wounds, he was able to return to life only after half a month, and this weakness still reminded him of the fragility of his existence. The young man began to think that it was time to look for allies for a joint hunt, because loneliness in this dangerous world threatened to become his death. Suddenly, a sharp pain pierced his eye, and he again felt that yellow glow, like a ghost from the past, awakening in him anxiety and hope. Waking up and looking around, he noticed a golden glow between the mountain slopes, alluring and mysterious, like the call of an unknown destiny. As he approached, he saw the glow intensify, bathing the mountains and surrounding area in a soft golden light that promised either salvation or a new threat. Before him appeared an alien beetle, unlike his previous enemies, with an unknown level of power, emitting an aura that made his heart beat faster. The hero gripped his blade tightly, keeping his eyes fixed on the mysterious beetle, whose golden aura seemed both alluring and deadly. The creature slowly crawled towards him, surrounded by radiance, like a living embodiment of light, hiding within itself an unknown power and mystery. The young man, like lightning, dashed across the distance to the enemy, causing the air to tremble with his decisive power. With a whistling sound, the blade plunged into the beetle's belly, easily tearing through its thick armor as if it were paper. Having examined the defeated enemy, the boy froze in amazement. The divine blood beetle promised the soul of the beast, capable of raising his strength to the heavens. Hansen's eyes widened. He couldn't believe it. Among the four classes, normal, primitive, mutant, and divine blood, such a beast was a legend. In the refuge, souls of divine blood are rare. They can be counted on the fingers, and the young warrior was eager to quickly uncover the secrets of this discovery. Realizing that the beetle's soul embodied the armor, the hero was struck by luck. His dream of power unexpectedly came true at this fateful moment. Activating the beetle's soul, the warrior watched in fascination as its glowing essence came to life, shooting upward in a bright spark. Descending from the heavens, the beetle's soul froze in the air, hypnotizing him with its mystical radiance before his eyes. A stream of golden energy enveloped the young man, penetrating every cell, filling his body with divine power, which made his heart beat faster. The armor, as if alive, smoothly enveloped the body, repeating every curve and forming an ideal protection, like a second skin. Liquid armor flowed, covering the warrior's head and shoulders, creating an indestructible suit of armor that glowed golden in the rays of light. Once the armor was fully formed, it covered all vulnerable spots, giving Hansen a feeling of unrivaled power and comfort. The light yet incredibly strong armor of the divine beast eclipsed the primitive armor of the shelter, striking the young man with its durability. Previously, he looked with envy at the magnificent armor of others, not daring to dream that he himself would acquire something so perfect. Burning with the desire to test his new power, the hero decided to immediately unleash his might on the rock to experience the divine armor in action. A crushing blow from his fist shattered the rock into pieces, and the stone fragments scattered as if obeying his will. The warrior struck blow after blow, shattering the rock into pieces, admiring the graceful power that flowed through his body like a river. Having acquired the armor of the divine beast, he felt euphoria. His life would now change forever, opening the way to great achievements. After many setbacks, a sudden stroke of luck lit a spark of hope in Hansen's eyes, promising a new stage in his heroic journey. Looking at the hearty soup made from the flesh of a divine beetle bubbling in a huge pot, the boy hid in the hope of getting the coveted evolution points from it. In his cramped room, he carefully placed a massive pot of fragrant brew on the fire, filling the air with a strange, almost mystical smell. The disgusting, bitter-tart taste of the soup made the cook sigh painfully, but he knew that it was necessary for his evolution. Looking over the statistics, the young warrior noted with delight that the beetle flesh had given him 7 evolution points, and the thick soup promised to increase his strength even more. Suddenly, Hansen remembered the mysterious item hidden in the beetle, which he had casually stuffed into his inside pocket, unaware of its hidden power. The tiny stone, emitting mystical energy, fascinated with its otherworldly glow, simultaneously enticing and inspiring an inexplicable fear. This mysterious sphere, shimmering with an unearthly light, seemed to be the heart of the beetle itself, as if it contained an ancient power beyond the control of the human mind. In the room where the cage with the experimental animal stood, the young man did not notice how the lizard reacted, sensing the power of the stone that he was squeezing in his trembling hand. In the blink of an eye, the beast snatched the sphere from the young man's palm, striking him with its unprecedented speed and agility, bordering on magic. Hansen turned around abruptly and cursed, angry at his own oversight that had allowed the lizard to so brazenly seize an artifact whose power remained a mystery. The huge lizard, having managed to catch the stone with its tongue, swallowed it, leaving its owner dumbfounded by its brazen act, full of primeval cunning. The warrior clutched the bars of the cage and showered the lizard with curses, but it, immersed in an ominous trance, did not react, as if the stone had taken possession of its mind. The beast's eyes went dark, and she froze as if life had left her, causing the young man to stand still, sensing the coming danger. The lizard's scales erupted in green flames, and it began to rapidly mutate, emitting a frightening energy that shook the air around the cage. Having grown to gigantic proportions, the lizard broke through the bars of the cage, turning into a formidable creature full of wild power. The mutated monster rushed at its master, sharp claws outstretched and fangs bared, ready to tear him to shreds with uncontrollable fury. With the agility of a seasoned warrior, the boy dodged the furious attack, instantly assessing the mortal threat posed by this newborn monster. He grabbed the blade with lightning speed and plunged it into the lizard's heart with surgical precision, stopping its onslaught of primal strength and fury. Before him lay not just a beast, but a gigantic green dragon, whose power and grandeur shocked the warrior, causing his heart to stop for a second. Stunned, he began frantically analyzing the data, trying to understand how the mysterious stone had caused such an incredible transformation in the beast. Delight overwhelmed him. The lizard, which had been a pitiful creature, under the influence of the stone, turned into a mighty dragon, opening the way to new horizons of power. Han Sen, his eyes blazing, plunged his sharp blade into the belly of the fallen beast, seeking to extract the shining crystal that promised unprecedented strength and power. Realizing that this mysterious stone was capable of elevating beings to the level of a god, the young man felt the key to a great destiny being born in his hands. Snatching the shimmering crystal from the monster's belly, the boy gently pressed it to his lips, realizing that he had found a treasure that would change his life forever. Leaving behind chaos and the torn body of the monster, the warrior, without looking back, left the kitchen where the bloody massacre was taking place, rushing towards a new goal. On the outskirts of the city, where the old house of the Sen family stood, relatives, blinded by greed, were engaged in a fierce dispute over the inheritance after the death of their father. Relatives surrounded Han Sen's mother and sister and furiously reproached them, arguing that a house full of memories should not belong to just one family. The fat uncle, puffing with indignation, insisted on dividing the inheritance, declaring that they had already lived in this house for 20 years, and it was time to divide the property. The second man, with a greedy gleam in his eyes, nodded in agreement, hoping to snatch his share of the inheritance, which could provide him with a comfortable future. The aunt, smiling slyly, offered to split the cost of the house, demanding 3 million so that everyone would get 1 million, without caring about the fate of Han Sen's family. Lo Sulan, Han's mother, refused to sell the house with a heavy heart, because without it, her children would be left homeless, and her memories without a shelter. Fatty stubbornly stood his ground, declaring that they weren't the only ones in trouble, as he also had to feed his family and pay for his son's education, and his debts were weighing him down like a heavy stone. Raising his finger in a decisive gesture, he firmly declared that he would put an end to the dispute, threatening to take the debtors to court if they did not pay every last coin, and his eyes sparkled with unyielding determination. The sister and mother, with broken hearts, sat in mournful silence on the porch of the old house, and the young man, who arrived too late, painfully realized that he had not managed to protect them. The boy was seething with rage, shocked by the impudence of his relatives who, having forgotten how his father had saved them from debt, were now trying to take away their home, betraying their former gratitude. The father died in vain, having become embroiled in a fatal quarrel with a powerful celebrity group whose greedy demands for old debts became a fatal curse for the family. Little Han Yan and her mother, Luo Sulan, cried loudly outside the old house, tormented by grief, as her mother blamed herself for not being able to protect their home from greedy hands. The young man, holding back his anger, tried to calm his mother and sister, vowing that their home would remain inviolable since he had already secured the support of an experienced lawyer. The mother, with hope in her eyes, looked at her son, while tears rolled down her cheeks. She realized with trepidation that her boy had become a grown man, capable of protecting the family from troubles. The young warrior, consumed with anger, left, vowing to avenge the tears of his mother and sister, to restore justice and defend the honor of his family at any cost. The majestic building of the Star World Transport Station, in the steel armor's shelter, was striking with its multi-level complexes and a bridge across which a high-speed train raced. The giant hanging screen boomed with news. President Zhao Yalong had completed his third evolution, becoming a demigod, and had stepped into the fourth dimension of the god's shelter. The young man walked leisurely through the station, listening to the screens where experts predicted that the first person to reach the fifth refuge of the gods would be the one who had mastered the fourth evolution. Entering the express train carriage, the young man settled down by the window, lost in thought about the news that echoed in his head, foreshadowing change. As he raced on the train, he pondered how to use the stone to gain the power of evolutionists, although collecting 100 points of the divine gene seemed like an almost unattainable dream. Driving over the bridge above the houses, the young man dreamed of earning money, using every opportunity to save up for a cozy home for his family. Within the steel armor vault lay the Valley of Falling Winds, a place of tall trees, thick grass, and enchanting nature where the air rang with magic. Making his way through the tall grass of the valley, the hero longingly recalled the soup he had left at home, which could have been the key to his fame and fortune. Cursing himself for the undercooked soup, he imagined how this masterpiece could have brought him more gene points, mountains of money, and fame among the steel armor shelter. Suddenly, his keen gaze caught a movement from the thick grass. A living creature was lurking there, its outline barely discernible in the green sea of the valley. It was a wind mantis, a master of camouflage in the tall grass, but the warrior, whose observation was sharper than his blade, spotted it first. A giant insect and true predator, the praying mantis, whose scythe-like legs resemble the blades of a dangerous razor, and whose lightning speed makes it a deadly opponent. Having studied the enemy's habits, the hero realized that the praying mantis was a primitive creature, but its incredible speed and sharp limbs inflicted crushing blows. Like a wild panther, the young man rushed into battle. Burning with determination, he needed the blood of this monster to prove his strength, courage, and to gain gene points. But the mantis was quicker, spreading its wings and soaring above the warrior like a shadow ready to fall from the sky onto its victim. Looking up, the young man froze, amazed at the incredible speed with which the insect took off, preparing for a furious attack from above. The monster's eyes glowed a bright yellow, and it hung in the air for a moment, like death itself, preparing to strike the warrior with its scythe. The mantis's powerful blow landed directly on the young man's helmet, causing him to stagger, but the hero stood firm, gritting his teeth from the force of the attack. Taking a step back, he thought that he had gotten into a fight in vain. The mantis's speed was stunning, and its paws were a deadly threat. Checking the helmet with his hand, the guy was amazed. Even after the mantis's furious attack, the armor remained intact, without a single scratch or dent. Clutching the blade, the warrior pushed off the ground with renewed vigor and, like a whirlwind, rushed towards the enemy, burning with determination to crush the mantis. With lightning-fast grace, the young man sliced the mantis into pieces with one swift swing of his blade, feeling his speed surpass the limits granted by fate. Landing with cat-like agility and crouching, he realized that in this impenetrable armor he would ascend to the pinnacle of evolution, conquering nature itself. After the triumphant slaying of the first praying mantis, the skies darkened and a whole flock of winged monsters burst forth from the clouds, ready to pounce on the daring warrior. Hansen stood as unwavering as a rock, as the mantis's deadly blows rained down on his armor, leaving not even a hint of a scratch. Realizing that even the mutated creatures could not defeat him, Hansen realized with cold confidence that he could destroy the entire flock in one fell swoop. With lightning-fast movements of his blades, he cut down the approaching mantises one after another, turning them into dust in the wind. The monsters attacked furiously, raining blows upon the warrior, but he, like a reaper, chopped off their paws, dancing through the whirlwind of battle with inexorable precision. The armor shone, reflecting the furious blows of the insects, while Hansen, moving with inhuman speed, destroyed enemies surrounded by a halo of death. The insects multiplied, creeping ever closer through the thick grass. their green bodies blending into it like ghosts ready to pounce from the shadows. Looking up, the hero saw a squadron of flying praying mantises above his head, their wings humming, heralding a new wave of furious attack on the warrior. Rapidly accelerating his movements, the guy vowed that he would send all these creatures to heaven. Having wandered into the mysterious valley of falling winds, the man looked around in bewilderment, not understanding how fate had led him here. Still young and anxious, he felt the cold of loneliness in an unfamiliar valley, where every rustle concealed an unknown danger. Remembering his brave protector Qin Xuan, he thought fondly of how inspiring it was to serve under her wise command. Dreaming of tracking down the mutant in the Valley of the Winds, the boy hoped that this girl would generously reward him for his courage. Scratching the back of his head, he wondered in amazement where all the wind mantises had gone, and who could have so mercilessly cleared out this once teeming valley. Exploring the bloody battlefield, where the scarlet grass bore traces of carnage, the boy realized that an entire army of warriors had fought here, leaving chaos in their wake. There was so much blood that it had not yet had time to soak into the ground. The young man, looking around anxiously, realized that a fierce and merciless battle had unfolded here. His pupils dilated in horror. What he saw was so incredible that if someone had told him about it, he would have considered it the invention of a madman, and not the truth. On the mountain of fallen enemies, like a legendary samurai, stood a mighty warrior, whose power and glory seemed forged in the fire of great battles. The hero, standing proudly, absorbed the sweet aftertaste of triumph, his shining armor sparkling without a single scratch, reflecting the rays of the sun like a mirror. The traveler, shaking his head in shock, refused to believe that this was reality. How one man could defeat a horde of formidable enemies without being harmed. Hansen turned around with a sly smile and met the admiring gaze of the boy, who, holding his breath, asked if he really had crushed all the enemies single-handedly. The warrior, squinting slyly, offered the youth to buy some juicy praying mantis meat for 1,000 coins per carcass, since even a hero couldn't eat a mountain of prey alone. The young rich man from a noble family agreed to the deal without batting an eyelid, because his wallet, stuffed with money, allowed him to avoid counting the coins. With a mischievous glint in his eyes, the teenager promised to pay generously on top if the warrior could get him something else exotic and rare. With a wide smile, the young rich man casually handed the warrior a thick wad of bills, as if it were small change for a street vendor. The hero, having raked in the money, curiously asked the generous teenager for his name and address, wondering what else could be gained from this. The boy, introducing himself as Su Xiaoqiao, gave his address with a good-natured smile, completely trusting and anticipating new purchases. Han Sen, having received his payment without revealing his name or address, quickly walked away, dreaming only of how to earn more money. The young boy, enchanted by the mysterious aura and indomitable strength of the young warrior, in a fit of delight, shouted after him a question about his name. Swiftly moving away, the hero, unable to find a better answer, laughingly called himself Money Brother, leaving behind a trail of mystery. A foul breath emanated from the monster's mouth, with terrifyingly sharp fangs, dissolving in clouds of steam into the frosty air of the gloomy lair. The young warrior, having reached the lair of the copper-toothed wolves, was confronted with their ferocious grins, for these furious creatures fiercely defended their gloomy refuge. While Sen was coldly searching for the enemy's vulnerabilities, 3 copper-toothed wolves rushed to attack with a wild roar, jumping from the sheer rock ledges. Having honed his speed in battles with the praying mantises, the warrior, without wasting a moment, rushed into battle with fury, his blades flashing. His movements, like a flash of light, scattered enemies in a split second, leaving only chaos and fallen bodies in his wake. Having instantly cut down 3 copper-toothed wolves, the warrior watched as their severed limbs, as if in an ominous dance, simultaneously fell to the ground. In the previous battle, he impulsively exterminated all the mantises, forgetting about the treasured stone. But now he cunningly left one monster alive for the sake of his plan. By examining the fallen beasts, the warrior managed to obtain the soul of one of them, despite the beast's primitive nature, which became the key to his goal. The young man, ablaze with delight, his eyes glowing with curiosity, pondered the mysterious soul of the beast, recalling that in the fierce battle with the praying mantises, he had failed to capture a single one. The boy, holding his breath, extended his trembling hand, and the wolf's soul, bursting out of his body, rushed swiftly like a whirlwind to its new master, promising unprecedented power. The beast's soul, blazing with ancient power, was embodied in a weapon, and in the warrior's hands a huge spear flared up, engulfed in scarlet flame, ready to crush any enemy. The hero, with dexterity, performed a series of powerful lunges and swings with the flaming spear, admiring its speed and destructive force that tore through the air. With one crushing blow, the warrior cut down the centuries-old tree, admiring the perfect balance of the flaming spear that had become an extension of his will. A huge gate, 3 meters thick and higher than the treetops, majestically guarded the entrance to the steel armor sanctuary. A young man, walking slowly with a copper-toothed wolf tied behind his back, passed under the monumental arch of the gate when a detachment of formidable horsemen moved towards him. The crowd scattered in panic, making way for a detachment of horsemen, the faithful followers of the mysterious Son of God. Standing proudly to the side, Han Sen carefully counted the number of horsemen, realizing that they were heading out on an important and possibly dangerous sortie. The leader of the squad, called the Son of God and suitor of Qin Xuan, noticing the young man who had offended his beloved, abruptly stopped his powerful pet, drilling Han Sen with his gaze. Fixing his blazing gaze on the insolent offender, he quickly drew his whip and lashed the boy across the shoulder with furious force. With a cry that broke the silence, he angrily reproached the boy for his shameless insolence in daring to trade primitive creatures in this shelter. Han Sen clutched his wounded shoulder, from which scarlet blood was already oozing, and thought with disdain that this pompous dandy had clearly lost his mind. The onlookers gathered around whispered, recalling that terrible incident when this young man mistakenly stabbed their heroine, Qin Xuan. With menacing cries and furious threats, the suitor announced to the crowd that anyone who dared to trade with this guy would bitterly regret it when faced with his merciless vengeance. Having escaped with only a wound on his shoulder, the young man considered himself lucky because the detachment, hurrying about their business, did not finish him off in the heat of the moment. A passing horseman, Luo Tianyang, with an unkind grin, told the guy that if their paths crossed again, he would beat him half to death for his insolence. Seeing off his offenders with a heavy, hate-filled gaze, Han Sen was already hatching plans for revenge, realizing that to do this he only needed to gain strength with the help of the crystal. After spending 3 grueling days observing the copper-toothed wolf, the boy realized with disappointment that the beast's mutation was proceeding much more slowly than he had expected. The mutated copper-toothed beast's fur should have become as strong as metal, but the test subject's fur only changed color, leaving its strength unchanged, much to the disappointment. Packing a bag for snacks on the way, the young man, full of determination, cast aside thoughts of waiting and decided to go hunting for primordials to earn money. Suddenly, muffled voices were heard outside the door. Men were arguing heatedly about the impending battle, and their words, like sparks, ignited a burning curiosity in the young man. Burning with impatience, he pressed his face against the crack in the door to see what was happening on the landing, where the shadows of his interlocutors flickered in the dim light of the torches. Men whispered that 3 powerful clans had converged on the sunset slope, drawn by rumors of a beast of divine blood, and they themselves were preparing to rush there for glory. Without listening to the end, the young man, like lightning, jumped up from his place and rushed towards Sunset Mountain, driven by excitement and anticipation of a great hunt. The mountain, ablaze in the rays of the sunset, seemed to come alive under the sky, and the warrior, having climbed to its peak, longed to see the epic battle unfolding below. At the top, breathing heavily and dropping to one knee, the young man peered into the distance, hoping that he was not late for the start of the grand battle. At the foot of the mountain, Clouds of smoke and dust swirled, illuminated by the agony of battle, where steel clanged and the cries of warriors merged with the roar of an enraged beast. Qin Xuan, dazzling in her anger, and her loyal comrades swiftly attacked from the left flank. The riders of the Son of God's squad, proudly sitting on their pets, drove the enemy into a trap with a deafening roar, shaking the earth with their mighty hooves. To the fiery cries of their leader, the warriors of the detachment, like a storm, rushed into battle, their hearts burning with determination. A mighty beast, like a centaur from ancient myths, swung a huge two-handed axe, deftly maneuvering among enemies like a wild horse rushing across the endless steppe. With unstoppable power, he scattered his attackers with his crushing blows, and they, like weightless fluff, flew to the sides, unable to withstand his fury. It was a real massacre. The enemies, many times inferior in strength to the formidable beast, fell one after another, their desperate cries drowned out by the roar of the indomitable monster. Han Sen, standing at a safe distance, watched the battle with concern, his keen gaze assessing the incredible might of his opponent, whose strength seemed almost divine. The leader of the horsemen approached the beast with determination, but at that moment, the centaur's giant axe fell with terrifying force, threatening to cut through everything in its path. Barely having time to jump from the saddle, the rider grabbed the hilt of his sword in mid-flight. His movements were swift in the face of a mortal threat. Qin, seeing the attack of monstrous power, anxiously watched her lover, her gaze full of love and fear, betraying the storm of emotions raging in her heart. The pet didn't have time to dodge. The centaur's crushing blow cut him in half, leaving only the echo of his death roar that echoed across the battlefield. The squire, stunned by the loss, froze in horror. Just recently, he had been caring for his pet, but now anger and grief, mixed with a thirst for revenge, burned in his eyes. The veins on the leader's neck bulged from his furious cry, like ropes about to snap, and his eyes blazed with uncontrollable anger, reflecting the might of the divine power seething within him. Han Sen watched from his hiding place, holding his breath, amazed, as the divine blood gave birth to supernatural powers beyond the control of mere mortals. The beast's fury grew with every minute of the battle, like a raging fire, and it seemed that no force in the world could stop its destructive onslaught. Archers fired hundreds of magical arrows, glowing with spells, in the hope that at least one would find a weak spot and pierce the monster's impenetrable skin. Swinging his huge axe with furious speed, he crushed everything in his path. People, pets, obstacles, and no weapon could leave even a scratch on him. Han Sen, unable to look away, was amazed. This beast, blazing with indomitable power, was many times superior to the beetle he had defeated when he received the divine blood. The warriors, losing their last strength, could not hold back the enemy's onslaught. The centaur, like a hurricane, trampled them with his hooves, like bugs under the giant's feet, breaking the encirclement. The heroes of the Son of God's squad, burning with courage, rushed into battle again and again, fearlessly attacking the monster, despite its terrifying power and inexorable fury. Like a living storm, the enemy rushed forward, tearing apart the ranks of defense. Sparks mixed with stones flew out from under his hooves, and the earth trembled under his steps. The leader, gathering all his will into a fist, summoned the divine soul, and at that moment time seemed to freeze, enveloping the world in mystical silence and anticipation of a miracle. A dazzling magical energy flared up in his hand, emitting a mysterious light and forming a weapon capable of crushing even a divine being. The soul of the poisonous, six-winged wasp of divine blood was embodied in the hands of the Son of God, taking the form of a giant arrow, blazing with unearthly power. The girl, holding her breath, looked at the young man with admiration and slight envy, because only a few in the shelter possessed such rare souls. The hero, drawing the string of his enormous ghostly bow, took aim with cold determination at the enemy, ready to crush him with one precise shot. The released arrow, with a crackling sound and sparks, like a lightning bolt, rushed after the centaur, cutting through the air with terrifying speed. At the moment of death, the centaur, as if sensing the inevitable, froze and cast a desperate glance at the arrow rushing towards him, carrying his fate. The arrow, like a red-hot blade, pierced the centaur like butter through a hot knife, tearing his chest apart, leaving behind only an echo of pain and destruction. The defeated centaur fell to the ground with a deafening roar, clinging in agony to the stone as if to the last thread of his elusive life. The young man looked with pride at his defeated enemy, mentally amazed at how he dared to challenge the Son of God. The battle-hardened warriors, shocked by the power of their leader, who had defeated the enemy with one crushing blow, looked at him with pride. Qin Xuan, looking at her hero in fascination, admired his inhuman strength, and her eyes shone with delight at his greatness and skill. With a slight mysterious smile, he met the gaze of the beautiful Qin Xuan, and something warm flashed in his eyes, hiding a storm of emotions. While the warriors, enchanted by the leader's feat, chatted in admiration, a blinding flash of light flashed towards the defeated enemy, leaving everyone in amazement. The centaur's divine soul was torn from his body in an instant by an unknown force, leaving only a devastated shell. The absorption of the divine beast's soul was completed successfully, and an invisible energy swirled around the mysterious warrior like a whirlwind. People, stunned by the spectacle and not understanding what had happened, looked in confusion as the flash of light quickly dispersed everyone. Han Sen, moving with elusive speed, merging with the surroundings like a ray of sunshine, received the soul of a divine beast and took possession of a huge centaur axe. Having stolen the soul, he quickly rushed away, leaving behind only a trail of light and the astonished glances of his competitors. Covering kilometers in a second, the fugitive raced across the endless plain and disappeared at the foot of the mountains, dissolving into the greenery of the trees. The warriors, their mouths open, froze in silent delight, amazed by the unprecedented speed of the hero, in whom the young Su Xiaoqiao recognized with trepidation the legendary Money Brother. Qin, the only girl among the stern warriors, watched the lightning-fast fugitive in amazement, wondering how her suitor would react to the audacity of this mysterious young man. He stood frozen in stunned amazement, amazed by the fugitive's brazen audacity, and the only question echoing in his head was who this mysterious Money Brother was. The young man, laughing, rushed forward, imagining untold riches, for he had acquired the second soul of the divine beast, thereby taking revenge on the Son of God, whose pride had fallen. Realizing what had happened, the leader, with a furious roar, sent his squad in pursuit, vowing to catch the audacious thief, whose impudence had ignited within him the flames of indomitable vengeance. Using ancient magic, he summoned a powerful pet, saddled his horse, and set off in pursuit, burning with a thirst for revenge for the daring theft that had defiled his honor. The huge gray-maned horse, summoned by magic, blew steam menacingly from its nostrils, as if sharing its master's furious anger, its eyes blazing with determination to catch up with the fugitive. The leader of the squad, his face distorted with rage, loudly ordered the horsemen to rush in pursuit, to catch the insolent man at any cost, whose audacity had challenged their honor. As he ran, the boy felt the heavy support restricting his movements, realizing that he wouldn't be able to maintain his breakneck speed for long, and that soon the pursuit would overtake him like a storm. The troop of horsemen was already looming behind them, and Han Sen could hear their furious cries demanding that he stop and accept the fate that was inexorably approaching with the clatter of hooves. The horsemen, shouting furious threats, quickly overtook the fugitive, and from the clatter of their charges, the heart of the young warrior beat in unison with the rhythm of the chase. Clutching an axe, the young man rushed through the forest, knowing that even 8 divine genes would not save him from the pursuit that was inexorably catching up, breathing down his neck. The leader of the squad, setting a frantic pace, shouted with caustic mockery how long this youth could run, eluding their blades. Reaching the limit of his strength, with beads of sweat running down his burning forehead, he clenched his teeth, realizing that the end was near and they would not ask him any questions. Resigned to his fate, he closed his eyes, remembering his mother, Luo Su Lan, and mentally asking for forgiveness for the daring risk that turned into a bitter defeat. Suddenly a voice flashed in his mind, daring him to believe that, panting with exhaustion, he was truly ready to stop and accept the inevitable end. The voice, like a war drum, thundered in his head, awakening childhood memories, and asked if he would really give in so easily, throwing up his hands before the enemy. It was my father's voice, clear and commanding, insisting that even in the most hopeless situation there was a way out if I had the courage to fight to the last. As a child, his father taught him a game where surrender meant defeat, and victory required killing enemies to advance to a new, more difficult level. The boy, trembling with fear, peered at the enemies surrounding him, assessing their strength and realizing that rushing into battle was a sure path to death. Father's words echoed in his heart. Danger was omnipresent, but he couldn't stand there trembling with fear. He had to act, even if hope seemed illusory. He was a passionate believer in genetic evolution, comparing it to an exciting adventure in which every living creature is tested. In the heat of the game, he accurately fired a smoke bomb from his bow, shrouding his enemies in a thick fog so he could slip unnoticed to his coveted target, using cunning as his best weapon. The released arrow emitted acrid clouds of gray smoke, blinding the enemies and creating the perfect moment for a lightning-fast maneuver to victory. Blinded by the acrid smoke, the wolves lost their bestial vigilance, and the father, relying on tactics, easily defeated them, proving that intelligence triumphs over strength. A well-chosen tactic became the key to triumph. Without armor or superpowers, he crushed formidable enemies, paving the way to his goal with cunning and courage. Remembering his father's lessons, Han-sen realized that without courage and risk, one cannot survive, and only the desire for self-development opens the path to true strength and success. In the game, he found himself at the bottom of the food chain, but his father taught him to become stronger in order to survive, tempering his spirit and body in the fight for his place in the sun. In those early years, the little boy had a vague understanding of what his father expected of him, and what deep secret lay hidden in his words, demanding courage and determination. Being smart, but still too young, he could not comprehend the hidden meaning of his father's instructions that was hidden between the lines of his wise words. Through the game, his father imparted to him the wisdom that in life you must become an unshakable pillar, relying only on your wit and strength to withstand the storms of fate. The father gripped his son's hand tightly and placed the hilt of the blade in it, forcing the little boy to freeze in anticipation of a new lesson, full of the harsh truth of life. Holding his son's trembling hand with the blade, the father suddenly plunged the sword into his chest, as if imprinting a lesson on the price of weakness and fortitude in the boy's heart. The moment the boy reached a new level in the game, his father's lesson was forever imprinted on his soul. Life does not forgive those who are not ready to fight to the end. The image of his father, frozen in his memory, inspired the young man. Focusing on his words, Han-sen realized that giving up was not an option, and it was time to take fate into his own hands. When he woke up, his eyes widened, a fire of hope blazed in them, and a plan was born in his mind on how to cheat death and survive. The enemies were already breathing down his neck, but gathering the last of his strength and blazing with hope, he rushed forward, ready to turn the tide of fate with one last action. Having caught up with the fugitive, the enemy let out a furious cry in which anger, determination, and the sweetness of revenge were mixed, echoing across the battlefield. The Son of God, frozen in mid-leap above his victim, swung for a fatal blow, but a desperate spark of salvation glimmered within the young man, promising an incredible turn of fate. With a burst of determination, the young warrior performed a fusion transformation with the stolen soul of the centaur, transforming into a blood-destroying beast. At a fateful moment, on the brink of death, Han-sen's soul merged with the spirit of the ancient beast in a blinding whirlwind, weaving their powers into a powerful harmony, giving birth to a transformation. Seeing the miraculous fusion of souls, the enemy froze in amazement, not believing his eyes. The young man accomplished the impossible, uniting with the soul on the brink of life and death. Han-sen's weapons, armor, and body were transformed by the fusion of souls, becoming more perfect, as if forged in a divine forge. The hero rejoiced, feeling a surge of new strength. It was as if he had been reborn in the body of a centaur. He felt invincible, ready to conquer any heights. Laughing to himself, the boy thought that this was only the beginning of the journey, because his new power concealed the potential to shake the heavens themselves. The horseman chasing him thought he was mad. Merging souls on the run was a risky venture, but in desperation the youth boldly challenged fate. The Son of God, who had fallen behind in the pursuit, looked angrily after the fugitive and ordered his henchmen to catch up and destroy the impudent one. In his centaur form, he raced effortlessly across the rocky terrain, using the strength of his new body to leave his pursuers far behind. The riders were ordered to destroy the centaur because he had ceased to be human and had become a dangerous creature that must be wiped off the face of the earth. One of the riders, looking at the steep cliffs, realized that it was almost impossible to catch the beast in its new form, because it had become a part of nature itself. Qin Xuan was angry and at the same time admired the bravery of the stranger, who not only absorbed the soul of the beast, but also stole the axe from under the nose of the Son of God. Discussing the moment when the Son of God wasted a disposable arrow and was left empty-handed, some were quite amused, because his pride already knew no bounds. Having made a halt, the squad heatedly discussed what had happened, and someone drunk suggested that the guy who stole the axe was called the Mysterious Bee. Reaching the deep forest lands, Han Sen, exhausted from the painful transformation, collapsed to the ground, breathing heavily under the starry sky. His gift of transformation lasted only 8 minutes. But fortunately, it was not the gods who were chasing him, otherwise even his shadow would not have escaped their pursuit. With his daring act, he insulted the honor of 3 powerful families, and now it is very dangerous for him to appear in the city with an axe. It must be hidden. The beast's soul cannot be sold, but the axe can be sold for 2 million. The young man, wondering who could buy such a weapon, dreamed of wealth. As the stars shone brightly in the night sky, he, tired but determined, reached the massive gates of the secret refuge hidden in the shadows of the forest. Rumors were spreading quickly in the shelter. Everyone already knew about the theft of the axe and were whispering, trying to guess who this mysterious bee was. The warriors scoured every corner looking for him, and if they had found the boy, he would not have lasted a minute under their furious blades. At the gate, the guard, preparing to search him, looked at the hero suspiciously, but he decided to temporarily forget about the axe, and no one would find the beast's soul. The guard stopped him with a sharp movement of his hand, warning him of a search, and his eyes showed distrust of the battered, empty-handed traveler. Taking one look at his shabby clothes, the guards decided that this poor man was not worth their time, because he clearly did not look like someone who had money. They dismissed him with contempt, telling him not to get underfoot, and set about the next ones with fervor, determined to find the thief. The young man, grinning slyly, since the guards had no idea or recognized him, confidently set off for the city, full of secrets and rumors. Word had already spread throughout the city about the mysterious Bai, who easily fooled the gods, causing both admiration and fear. As Han Sen passed by a lively group of people who were discussing what had happened, he caught a glimpse of the Son of God smashing his house to pieces in a rage. The young man was amused by how little Su Xiaoqiao, who had previously proudly called himself Money's brother, now called himself the brother of the cunning Bai. The majestic building where the detachment of the Son of God was located stood proudly in the center of the city. The influential Qin Xuan secretly invited Su Xiaoqiao to her secluded room, saving him from the torture that the Son of God's people were about to inflict. Sternly piercing the trembling boy with her gaze, Qin Xuan demanded with icy calm that he reveal all the secrets about the mysterious money brother without hiding the slightest detail. The youth, spreading his hands in confusion, swore that he knew nothing about it, that he had only bought a couple of dead creatures and shared them with his friends, begging them to believe his innocent eyes. Fortunately for the boy, Qin Xuan was not eager to punish him. She only coldly ordered him to convey a message to Money Brother that he wanted to buy an axe as sharp as her temper. The boy, beaming with relief at having escaped the wrath of the formidable warrior, promised with a broad smile to deliver her message, glad to be safe and sound. Deep in the night, in the mountains near a mirror lake, a young warrior surrounded by shadows stalked his prey, his path illuminated by the starry sky. As he devoured the succulent flesh of the green, scaly beast, he gloomily reflected that the city had already put a price on his head, but this only fueled his resolve. Studying his characteristics, the young man looked with annoyance at the 0 in the mutating gene, realizing that his strength was not yet capable of comparing with the legends. Suddenly, bubbles began to form in the dark waters of Lake Blackwater, and a seething whirlpool caught the warrior's eye, foreshadowing the emergence of an unknown threat from the depths. Slowly rising to the surface, the monster revealed its ugly, scaly head with yellow-green eyes, whose ominous lights pierced the darkness, causing the guy's heart to stop. Noticing the young man's gaze, the monster slowly sank back into the black waters of the lake, leaving only ripples and an oppressive silence on its surface. At that very moment, an ominous rustling sound came from the dark thickets near the lake. The hero prepared to meet a new threat lurking in the darkness of the forest. The sharp-eyed boy pierced the dense darkness of the forest, looking around warily, feeling how the night breeze carried with it mysterious whispers and distant rustles. He noticed a silhouette slowly emerging from the deep shadows between the twisted tree trunks, its outlines shimmering mysteriously in the moonlight. This mysterious stranger's clothes were all torn, as if he had survived a fierce battle with wild animals, leaving ragged traces of adventure and suffering on the fabric. Slowly, with the caution of a predator, the approaching one moved step by step through the dense bushes, where the leaves rustled under his feet and the shadows played hide-and-seek. The hero, without looking away, simply watched this ragamuffin with his keen, penetrating gaze, wondering to himself why he was so torn and exhausted. Finally, meeting their eyes in a tense silence, Hansen warned the ragged man not to go near the pond, as a crocodile was lurking there. The stranger, in his tattered clothes and with a hoarse voice, asked the hero what this wild, mysterious place was and where exactly the legendary sanctuary of glory was hidden. The hero, to his surprise, had not the slightest idea about the sanctuary that the stranger asked him about, and it soon became clear that the poor traveler was lost. This unknown young man, full of despair, bowed his head, and in his eyes, full of deep sadness and disappointment, the shadows of unfulfilled hopes were reflected. Looking into Hansen's eyes with unwavering determination, he demanded with authority that he be led to the legendary sanctuary of glory, where the secrets of the ancients lay hidden. Sensing the cold harshness in the stranger's voice, Hansen frowned, shocked by the audacity of someone who dared to give him orders. Deciding not to waste his energy on the pathetic stranger, Hansen held back his anger and merely pointed the way south, where, according to rumors, the cherished goal awaited. As soon as the young warrior looked away, the treacherous stranger dealt him a vile blow to the back, which cracked his vertebrae and sent pain through the hero's entire body. The force of the blow sent Hansen crashing down, his head hitting the rock, and the world spun until blood gushed from the wound, covering his palm. Clutching his wound, blood oozing from between his fingers, an enraged Hansen cried out questioningly, his voice trembling with pain and rage. The stranger, clenching his fist, stood confidently, growling threateningly that the boy had better obey and take him to the sanctuary, or worse would come. Stunned by the stranger's strange behavior, the warrior quickly drew his weapon, preparing to fight back against this mysterious enemy. Confused by the stranger's audacity and actions, the young man assumed a fighting stance, his eyes burning with determination to defend his honor. Swinging his spear, he angrily warned the enemy not to force him to kill, his voice ringing like steel, ready for battle. The daring, ragged man grinned mockingly, his eyes flashing with a bold challenge, foreshadowing a furious, merciless fight where every blow would be like a clap of thunder. The enemy's hand burst into a blinding flame, and he scornfully remarked that the soul of the fallen beast was pitiful and unworthy of comparison with his indomitable power. With his bare hand, as if with a sharp blade, the enemy easily repelled the furious attack of the spear, demonstrating superhuman strength and lightning-fast reactions. The spearhead cracked, broke off from the shaft, and flashing fell onto the lush green grass, leaving the warrior speechless. Han Sen froze in shock as his opponent cut the spear with his bare hands, using nuclear genomic technology that seemed to embody ancient power. Drawing power from ancient martial arts, this technique awakens the hidden potential of genes, releasing explosive energy comparable to nuclear fusion. The traveler, with cold mockery, offered the warrior a final choice: to resign himself and lead, or to meet death in an unequal but fierce battle. The enraged warrior, seething with anger, reproached the ragged man, saying that he, apparently in childhood, knew neither courtesy nor honor, but only wild, unbridled insolence. Activating the divine armor, the warrior rushed into the attack with a thunderous cry, vowing to send his companion straight to hell along a path of his own blood. The enemy, dodging the attack with cat-like agility, instantly lunged to the side, as if dancing on the brink of life and death with devilish grace. In the blink of an eye, the wily villain, with lightning-fast precision, delivered a crushing counterblow to the warrior's ankle, putting all his power into the blow, causing the air to tremble. A bright flash from the impact illuminated the surrounding area, momentarily revealing dark silhouettes casting ominous shadows on the ancient stones. A deep scratch remained on the divine armor, and, looking at it, the young warrior realized that before him was an opponent whose strength exceeded all expectations. With a mocking grin, the enemy declared that the youth had only withstood his ice muscle and jade bone technique, thanks to the divine armor, and demanded that he hand it over. The young man, burning with anger, was not going to give in and rushed into a swift attack, like a hawk ready to tear its prey to pieces in an instant. His speed was like a whirlwind, but the ragamuffin, with the agility of a predator, managed to block the blow, causing the air to ring with the clash of their forces. At that moment, the young warrior realized that he was trapped, and his heart sank with a premonition of impending disaster. The enemy, with a beast's fury, caught Han Sen by the leg in mid-flight and slammed him into the ground with terrifying force, causing the stones beneath him to crack like fragile glass. Scarlet blood gushed from the young man's mouth, staining the dust, and his pain-filled scream echoed throughout the forest, causing tremors in the invisible spirits. Having knocked the enemy to the ground and crushed him with his weight, the ragamuffin dealt furious blows, reproaching the young man for his weakness. Each furious blow pressed the boy's head into the cold stones, blood flowed in a scarlet stream through the cracks, and his consciousness trembled on the brink of darkness and hopeless despair. Suddenly, Han Sen transformed and delivered a crushing blow, sending his enemy flying, crushing his nose into a bloody pulp and causing him to stagger back in pain. A powerful blow knocked the breath out of the once self-confident man. His pride crumbled, and the world around him spun in a whirlwind of pain and confusion, destroying his former confidence. The young warrior stared at the enemy, his blazing gaze filled with only one inexorable truth: death, ready to devour everything in its path. In one blinding instant, the divine souls of the centaur and the beetle armor merged, giving birth to an unknown force that shook the very fabric of reality. The villain, stunned by what he saw, opened his mouth in a silent scream, and splashes of blood from his broken nose flew out like a scarlet storm, foreshadowing his end. Filled with the indomitable strength of a centaur, the young man rushed towards the enemy like lightning, ready to incinerate everything in its path. The terrified villain only managed to raise his hands, vainly trying to defend himself from the inexorable blow that fell upon him like the wrath of the gods. Han Sen's fists, like two red-hot sledgehammers, crushed the enemy's face into stone with a deafening crunch, turning it into a bloody mask of pain. The enemy, bleeding under a hail of merciless blows, wheezed out pleas for mercy, but his cries were drowned out by the roar of the warrior's inexorable rage. The young warrior, burning with righteous anger, knew no mercy. showering the enemy with blows, each of which was like a hammer forging the fate of the defeated one. Blood, like a scarlet flame, flew in huge drops in all directions, painting everything in an ominous pattern of battle, where life and death were intertwined in a furious dance. It was as if a builder had gone over the enemy's body with a jackhammer, leaving the defeated man lying in the dust, where the shadows of the past laughed at his broken hopes. Sitting down on the cold ground, the young man, still trembling, realized that his hands, stained with blood, had taken someone else's life in a merciless fight. Even in his strong armor, he received serious wounds, and if the soul of a wild beast had been burning within his enemy, the young man would hardly have survived this deadly duel. Exhausted, crawling on all fours towards the body of his fallen enemy, he was burning with the desire to study it, as if it were the key to unraveling their cruel fate. Searching the lifeless body, the young man rummaged through his pockets, hoping to find something useful that could serve as salvation, or at least a hint as to the meaning of this massacre. Under the torn shirt on the enemy's chest, he felt a tiny thing, cold and hard, as if it held secrets that could change everything. It was a tiny, glittering crystal, a memory chip, shimmering like a star and holding secrets that could change his entire world. Having reached the shelter and secluded himself in his room, the guy, exhausted by the battle, decided to make coffee in order to find at least a moment of peace in this chaos. As Han-sen examined the shimmering chip, he realized that this tiny crystal, worth a fortune, held secrets that could open the way to a new, unknown life. Placing the crystal into the data extraction machine, he held his breath, anticipating what secrets this tiny medium would reveal. When he realized what was there, his pupils narrowed in amazement. He froze, shocked by his find, realizing that this chip could change his fate forever. The chip contained a rare training program for the ice muscles and jade bone technique, promising unprecedented strength and mastery, accessible only to a select few. In the video stored on the chip, a graceful young woman demonstrated elegant yet deadly techniques with cold confidence, captivating with her technique and beauty. The young man rejoiced, realizing that luck had smiled upon him. The high-level nuclear technology he had discovered could elevate him to the pinnacle of mastery in a world full of dangers and rivals. After 3 days of grueling, sweat-soaked training, he mastered one of the techniques, feeling his body fill with a new, indomitable strength. Looking at his hand, Han-sen felt a coldness radiating from it, and his skin seemed to radiate mystical energy, confirming the power of the technique he had mastered. Even his body temperature dropped by 2 degrees to 35, and he realized that his physical essence had begun to transform under the influence of the ancient technique. Clenching the chip in his fist, he thought that storing this priceless artifact would be a serious problem, because it would be hunted. A sudden ringing of his mobile phone broke the silence of the night, making his heart stop. Who could be calling at such an hour, and what secrets did this unexpected contact hide? His relative, whose voice trembled with impatience, called the guy a psycho in a friendly manner and ordered him to come immediately. Han Huo and Shui Shi were already waiting for him. Listening carefully, the boy felt anxiety tightening in his chest, but curiosity got the better of him, and he asked where they were all going together. There was no answer, only a request to get ready and that someone would come for him soon. These words only increased his confusion, fueling his burning curiosity. Thoughtfully putting down the phone, the young man became lost in thought. Money Brother was still a mystery, and no one suspected who he really was. On the highway bridge, their car raced through the city, cutting through the air, as if in a hurry to reveal some sinister secret. The company was having fun, but Han-sen, lost in his thoughts, looked out the window until one of his friends jokingly called him Snowball, regretting his long absence. The friends laughed, remembering how B, having turned into a centaur, ran away from the chase, leaving his pursuers to swallow the dust raised by his hooves. But the young man thought with longing how he wanted to reveal to his friends who B really was, but the heavy secret shackled him like invisible chains. Arriving at the steel shelter, Han Ho, his cousin, put the family in a difficult situation, and this news only increased the young man's anxiety. The young man, not knowing where he was being taken, felt a vague discomfort, but curiosity, like a spark, pushed him to ask what awaited them at the end of this mysterious road. As they approached the majestic building, shining like a mirror in the rays of the crimson sunset, the driver grinned and announced that they were almost there. It was the legendary Starlight Martial Arts Stadium, whose emblem, the Golden Triangle, shone proudly as a symbol of unrivaled power and glory. A huge crowd was seething under the stadium's dome, filling the stands to capacity, their roar merging into a single rhythm, anticipating a great spectacle. Everyone, as one, chanted the name of Dong Jinryu. The young man thought that this man must be a real star whose fame thundered everywhere. He was the son of God who took his place in the first refuge, and his name, carved on the divine monument, became a legend sung by generations. In the center of the arena, surrounded by a crackling electric field, amidst scattered rocks, stood a warrior whose fiery aura burned so brightly that it obscured his body. Suddenly, the soul of the beast, bursting out of its body, rushed towards the dome of the stadium, shining like a comet and causing enthusiastic cries from the spectators. The boy, unable to look away, screamed with delight, confident that in front of him was the soul of the beast Dong Jinryu himself, whose power seemed unrivaled. As Hanhuo watched the spectacle, he noticed that this soul was still inferior in strength to the blood exterminator B's soul, causing controversy among his friends. Han Sung's friend, nicknamed Psycho, vehemently objected, claiming that B had acquired his soul dishonestly by stealing it, and that it was unacceptable to compare him to the great Dong Jinryu. The young warrior grinned and thought that his crazy friend was, to some extent, right, but to reject such a generous gift of fate would be the height of stupidity. No one was supposed to suspect that the mysterious Bai, whose name was whispered in the shadows, was in fact he, the master of stealth and deception. His cozy apartment, hidden in a quiet area of an old 5-story building, held secrets that even his neighbors had no idea about. Looking closely at the captured copper-toothed beast, Hansen realized that the mutation had been complete within 15 days, transforming the creature into something terrifyingly perfect. Possessing the mutated beast, the warrior considered whether to consume its flesh for the gene, but the thirst for money proved stronger. Fixing his gaze on the copper-toothed wolf, the young man firmly decided that the time had come to contact the buyer who was thirsty for rare prey. With a slight smile, the warrior recalled Su Xiaoqiao, who generously paid in hard cash for the rare flesh of exotic animals. Late at night, under the shade of tall trees, the two met to make a deal in silence, hidden from prying eyes. Young Xiao, clutching a briefcase containing 2 million in cash, received dried copper-toothed wolf meat from the warrior, smelling of mystery and power. Confidently handing over the meat, the hunter assured Xiao with a grin that everything was fair, although a spark of cunning flashed in his eyes. Having received the meat, the young man with a sincere smile conveyed a message from Qin Xuan. She was eager to buy the axe and the soul of the divine beast. As the hunter walked away into the night, he nodded, but firmly stated that the woman must name her price if she wanted to continue doing business with a master like him. In the night sky, the stars flickered dimly, breaking through the thick fog that shrouded the treetops, as if hiding the secrets of the forest. Wandering through the forest, the warrior suddenly noticed a gap between the rocks, where at the bottom of a dark pit lurked a bottomless cave full of dangers. The deep cave was teeming with huge poisonous scorpions, but the warrior easily killed them, collecting a rich booty. Satisfied that he had killed almost all the scorpions, whose attacks his strong armor had easily repelled, he headed for the exit. Wandering through the dark cave, he barely made out a silhouette lurking near the wall, and froze when a familiar voice suddenly called out to him. The warrior shuddered at the unexpected shout, his eyes wide open, not believing that anyone could have found him in this gloomy cave. Warrior Qin Xuan turned to him with a smile and called him Money Brother, causing the warrior to freeze in amazement. The young man looked at the beautiful Qin Xuan in confusion, wondering how she ended up in this cave and what secrets brought her here. Deciding to ignore the warrior continued on his way, but her insistent cry with a plea to pull her out of the cave made him stop. Turning around in bewilderment, The young man asked if she really wanted him to carry her in his arms, since she couldn't offer any other way. The warrior clearly had a leg injury, and with no other options, she limped, unable to walk on her own through the dark cave. Sensing a catch, the young man mentally reassured himself that his divine armor would protect him from any threat, even from the treacherous warrior. Upon learning that Qin Xuan had been stung by a scorpion, the boy was surprised that she had survived, as the poison of such a beast should have killed her instantly. Calling upon the soul of the butterfly, she revealed that the scorpion had stung her while the dragon's power flowed through her veins, granting her protection. Summoning a butterfly soul dagger with a poisonous heart, the warrior warned the young man not to even think about taking advantage of her weakness. She added sternly that his vaunted armor would hardly withstand the blow of her divine blade, shining with deadly power. The young man raised his hand and asked the girl to calm down and put away her weapon, assuring her that he had not even thought of attacking, although doubts tormented him. He wondered to himself if Qin Xuan was reading his thoughts, because her words reflected the shadows of his own thoughts all too accurately. Blushing with shame, the warrior quietly added that she was ready to pay generously if the warrior would pull her out of the gloomy cave to a safe place. The young man, with a noble smile, refused the money, but remembered the scorpion she had mentioned, and his eyes lit up with curiosity. She wondered why he needed another scorpion, since he had already killed so many, but the warrior only smiled mysteriously in response. Looking into the hunter's stuffed bag, Qin Xuan gasped, amazed at the number of defeated scorpions piled up in a heap of prey. The warrior, with firm determination, declared that as payment he would take the soul of the mutant scorpion, whose power beckoned him with its mystery. Returning to the dead scorpion lying in a pool of blood, the young man carried out his plan without hesitation, absorbing its dark essence. Having emerged from the bottomless dungeon, they found themselves in a dense forest, where darkness hid their silhouettes. Through the dense treetops, the stars barely illuminated Han Sen, carrying the beautiful lady on his shoulders like a guard protecting a treasure. Holding tightly to the shoulders of her savior, the girl whispered that he should take her to the shelter, but not go in, fearing that they would be seen together. On the way, Qin Xuan recalled with disgust how the young man greedily devoured the scorpion without batting an eye, as if it was a familiar ritual for him. At the shelter, Han Sen carefully lowered the warrior to the ground, advising her to find someone who would help her, keeping their meeting a strict secret. Placing Qin on the ground, the young man firmly extended his hand, demanding the promised payment for saving her, his eyes burning with cold determination. As she handed over the soul, she remembered the little Su Xiaoqiao, whom she had entrusted to deliver the message, and asked if he had completed the task. Clenching the acquired soul in his fist, the warrior confirmed that the message had been received and named a price: 2 million for the axe and the soul of the mutated beast. Qin Xuan, with a sly smile, began the bargaining, declaring that the souls of mutated beasts outside the shelter were useless and offered only 1 million. Denezhny, after a slight hesitation, did not answer, promising that she would soon receive news from the boy about the place of the new meeting. Looking sternly after the departing warrior, Qin thought what a curmudgeon he really was, hiding her admiration for his tenacity. The young man entered the shelter at dawn, when the first rays of the sun pierced the dark clouds, illuminating his path with a weak light. With the precious load on his shoulder, he walked across the main square, looking around cautiously, as if sensing an invisible threat. Suddenly, the warrior noticed a familiar silhouette in the square, his cousin Han Ho, whose appearance promised both good fortune and a hidden threat. He glanced sharply at Han Sen, but when he received no answer, he frowned, clearly irritated by his cold indifference. The hero, deciding to pretend that he did not recognize his brother, stubbornly walked on, ignoring the shadow of the past that loomed behind him. Han Ho, not giving up, called out to his brother and rushed to catch up, his steps echoing across the morning square. Stopping, the young warrior turned around and, squinting, asked his brother what he wanted, hiding his curiosity and wariness behind his mask. Han Ho explained that he had heard about his skirmish with God's son and Qin Xuan and wanted to tell him something important. With growing curiosity, the young man looked at his brother, waiting for words that could change their shaky family ties. Han-ho admitted that he had recently arrived at the shelter, where his new life was just beginning, and begged his brother not to reveal their relationship because he did not want any problems. Han-sen reluctantly agreed, but he felt sad inside, thinking that he had never considered him a true brother anyway. A hint of resentment mixed with anger flashed in the young man's eyes, as if an old wound had opened under the gaze of a cold relative. Walking quickly away, he thought bitterly that his paths with his brother had never crossed in friendship, only in the shadow of indifference. Arriving home, Han-sen tremblingly laid out his loot on the table. 2 suitcases filled with money, gold, and jewels that sparkled like his future. Looking with delight at the mountain of money, the young man realized that his life was about to change, and decided to first take a walk with his mother and sister. Walking along the alley among the brightly colored shop windows and stores, they stopped at a restaurant that served legendary ice cream. Holding his sister's hand, the young man decided to make her dream come true by treating her to sapphire ice cream, sparkling like a star in her eyes. The girl, beaming with happiness, looked at her brother with love, exclaiming that he was the best, and her smile warmed his heart. His mother frowned and reminded him that ice cream was expensive, and they should save the money he had worked so hard to get. Reassuring his mother, the son confidently explained that his new mutations would allow him to earn more, opening the way to prosperity. He suggested going up to the 2nd floor of the restaurant, where it was quieter, since there were too many noisy customers crowded in the hall. A guard stopped them, saying that the passage was closed, and Han-sen looked at him, puzzled, not understanding the reason for the ban. The man politely explained that the 2nd floor was intended only for celebrities and aristocrats, inaccessible to ordinary guests. With annoyance in his eyes, Han-sen repeated the guard's words, feeling humiliation burn in his heart like a hot coal. The mother, gently placing her hand on her son's shoulder, calmed him down, persuading him to simply buy ice cream for his sister and forget about the insult. The uneasy feeling still gnawed at Han-sen, and he clenched his fists and vowed to himself to become a celebrity so that no one would dare to humiliate him. High above the city, on massive columns, the overhead railway stood proudly, as if supporting the clouds themselves. In a crowded train carriage, a guy was clinging to a handrail and grumbling that this type of transport is always packed to capacity, like sardines in a can. Suddenly, there was a ringing sound. A train wheel jumped off the rail, and the carriage shook, causing horror among the passengers. Panic broke out in the cramped carriage. People were screaming, not understanding what was happening, and the young man was losing his balance in the crowd. He stumbled and clumsily collided head-on with the girl, instinctively grabbing her to keep from falling together. Accidentally touching the girl's cleavage with his hand, he froze, feeling how awkwardness gripped him like an icy grip. The young man's eyes widened, and he was stunned, a drop of sweat rolling down his cheek, revealing his embarrassment in front of the stranger. The girl, exploding with indignation, screamed, "Scoundrel!" and hit her offender in the jaw with her elbow, putting all her rage into the blow. Han-sen clutched his jaw and apologized desperately, explaining that the touch was an accident, but his words were drowned out by her anger. Meeting the stranger's gaze, he recognized Qin Xuan, whose face was flushed with rage when she realized who was in front of her. Stunned, not understanding how their paths had crossed again, he asked the girl what she was doing in this crowded carriage. Shocked by his luck, the loser thought that first the dagger, now the cleavage. Such accidents cost him too much. Qin, glaring at him, mentally branded the young man a scoundrel, believing that his stupidity had given way to brazen insolence. The scene attracted curious glances, and some passengers whispered, certain that the young man had deliberately touched the girl's breast. Han-sen tried sincerely to explain that it was an accident caused by a slipping train wheel that caused him to lose his balance. But not believing a word, the warrior called him a repeat offender, because this was not the first time he accidentally touched her. Luckily, the train pulled into the station, interrupting the awkward altercation and saving the loser from further accusations from the angry beauty. As she left, Qin Xuan angrily warned Han Sen that next time she would send him to prison, her voice ringing with a cold threat. On the platform at the train stop, the soldiers stood at attention and greeted Qin Xuan as the station's mistress and mistress. Upon learning that this girl was in command of the garrison, the hero was amazed, realizing that he could be being watched because of her influence. Clutching his head, he bitterly cursed his bad luck, feeling how fate was tripping him up again. As he walked down the street, he frantically thought about how to avoid meeting Qin without revealing his secret identity. Suddenly, a rude shout came from behind him. Someone called him an idiot and ordered him to come closer. The voice sounded with obvious mockery. One of the soldiers, smirking, demanded that the guy come over, stating that he had questions for the suspicious young man. Waving his hand with a forced smile, Han Sen said he didn't want to waste the busy soldier's time, hoping to avoid trouble. The soldier, clapping him on the shoulder, firmly stated that his opinion did not matter to anyone, and that it was an order, not a request. The bright sun flooded the dense forest on the mountain slope, casting long shadows from the trees, which seemed to warn the young man of impending danger. The foot squad ran at a light jog along the path between the trees, their footsteps echoing in the silence of the forest, full of hidden threats. The warriors, beaming with joy, rejoiced at the success of the hunt, as they had managed to catch many outlandish creatures for their master. 3 days after leaving the shelter, Han Sen was angry that the soldiers dragged him along on a hunt without asking his consent. At the edge of the cliff where the road ended, the young man wondered why the Son of God needed these low-level creatures, tormented by doubts that this was simply a trap. The cliff offered a view of an endless expanse of land and a gigantic bottomless abyss, like a gaping wound in the earth. Looking into the abyss, the Son of God solemnly announced that they had reached their goal, and his voice sounded like the rumble of fate. The platoon commander pointed to one of the soldiers, ordering him to go on reconnaissance, and looked firmly at the others, expecting obedience. Having given the boy a slap on the back of the head, the commander admonished him not to let the squad down, sending the young man after the scout into the unknown. Bent over from the blow, the young warrior gloomily wondered if they would simply be thrown into a dark dungeon in the middle of a wild forest with no chance of return. Upon returning, the scouts led the detachment into a gloomy cave, where torches cast flickering reflections, illuminating the path into the darkness. As they delved deeper into the depths of the cave, the warriors peered vigilantly into the darkness, prepared for any threat lurking in the gloom. The commander, fearless, lit a glowing saber, urging the squad to hurry in order to quickly get the promised money. Descending into a spacious grotto, the warriors saw an underground river, whose waters flowed at the exit of a tunnel hidden in darkness. Bright torches reflected off the rocks, illuminating the space around and giving the cave a mysterious, almost magical glow. The river's current seemed fast, but its waters were surprisingly calm, as if they concealed an unknown force beneath them. One of the warriors reported to Commander Ryu that the tunnel had ended, pointing to the river as the only way forward. The commander grinned and pulled out tiny boats from his pocket, which, upon touching the water, miraculously grew in size. The warriors, amazed, admired this magical invention, which made the crossing convenient and fast, like a gift from the gods. Han Sen, watching in confusion, realized that the squad had prepared thoroughly because a new tunnel was visible on the other side of the river. Part of the squad divided into inflatable boats, several people in each, and began crossing the dark waters. Anxiety overcame the young warrior. He was tormented by questions about why they were the only ones in the boats, why the Son of God was hiding, while the commander remained on the shore. Suddenly something moved on the dark surface of the water, causing Han Sen to freeze, peering intently into its depths. He opened his eyes wide, trying to discern the source of movement in the water, his heart pounding with a premonition of trouble. Suddenly, a gigantic monster burst out of the water with a roar, soaring up to the ceiling of the cave, its shadow covering everything around with a terrifying darkness. The monster rose up with such speed that half the water in the river rushed after it, dragging the boats into a whirlpool of chaos. The doomed soldiers cried out for help, their boats capsized under the pounding waves, and the water swallowed them up one by one. Hansen's boat remained afloat. The survivors clambered onto it, panicked and unable to understand what was happening in this hell. The Son of God, standing on the safe shore, watched the carnage with a smile, rejoicing at the awakening of the beast of divine blood. A huge black water dragon, with eyes blazing with yellow fire, towered over him like a product of the darkest depths. The monster, like a demon from hell, mercilessly devoured people, snatching them from the water with terrifying precision and fury. The survivors in the boats, trembling, swam away from the monster, desperately rowing with oars, but hope melted away with each jerk in the dark water. On the shore they were met not with salvation, but with lightning-fast blows of swords that struck without mercy, like a punishing sentence. The Son of God, shouting threats, executed the fugitives for their cowardice, cutting them into pieces and reproaching them for running like rats, despite his payment. In his anger he was relentless, sending people with furious cries to certain death in battle with the invincible beast of divine blood. The soldiers had no choice but to fight the monster or fall by their own swords, every step leading them to certain death. Hansen, shocked by what was happening, could not understand why people were sent to certain death, because they had no chance against the beast. While the dragon hid in the water, people in boats, gathering their last strength, rowed to the opposite shore, saving themselves from death. The guy figured out the cunning plan. The command wanted to feed the beast, distract it, and get to the other side. The spray from the oars lashed the young man in the face, but he rowed with all his might, determined that he would not allow himself to die here. Suddenly the shadow of a beast flashed under the boat, its ominous outline gliding through the water, foreshadowing a new wave of horror. The monster burst from the water, grabbing the rower and capsizing the boat, sowing chaos and death among the warriors desperately thrashing in the waves. Falling into the water, Hansen activated his armor, and amid the noise of carnage, contemplated escape before the chance slipped away. Swimming rapidly underwater, he escaped the epicenter of the battle, his heart pounding in the rhythm of the fight for survival. The survivors, with cries of horror, reached the shore. Out of 40 people, only 7 survived, exhausted and broken by fear. Commander Ryu, with a cynical smile, reported to the master that the beast was sated, and now the path to the other bank was safe. The Son of God, with a cold smile, walked forward, indifferently stepping over the corpses of his people, as if they were just dust. Having safely crossed to the other bank, the remnants of the detachment, led by the leader, entered a dark, ominous tunnel. At the end of the tunnel, a grotto opened up with a shallow lake, where a pile of stones was neatly laid out in the center. Among them lay a clutch of 2 divine blood dragon eggs, like the treasures of the ancient gods. With eyes burning with madness, the Son of God gazed at the dragon eggs, anticipating how their ancient magic would pour divine strength and boundless power into his veins. He, burning with determination, ordered the surviving warriors, whose faces were pale with fear, to immediately go there and obtain the sacred eggs at any cost. The brave ones, gritting their teeth, went to the nest, where each, trembling, grabbed a huge egg, pulsating with warmth. Suddenly, a water dragon emerged from the dark waters with a deafening roar, its gigantic mouth gaping like the gates of hell, ready to swallow all living things. The warriors, frozen with horror, stood frozen like prey in the palm of their hand, clutching the eggs that the dragon guarded with fierce devotion, not knowing how to escape. The Son of God, shouting furious curses, rushed forward with sword in hand, ready to crush anyone who dared to stop him. At Commander Ryu's command, the remaining warriors, casting aside their fear, rushed at the dragon to distract it, sacrificing themselves for their master. The young demigod, with a greedy grin, snatched the eggs from the soldiers' trembling hands and rushed away, shouting for the warriors to stop the monster, no matter the cost. At that moment, Ryu, with wild fury, grabbed the 2 stunned soldiers by the collar, whose eyes begged for mercy, but their fate was sealed. Shouting that they were nothing but cannon fodder, he hurled them one after another straight into the dragon's gaping mouth, whose fangs closed with a terrifying crunch. Running headlong, with a triumphant smile and without a shadow of remorse, the character raced away, clutching the stolen eggs whose power promised him power over the world. Before he could blink, he was suddenly struck by a fist that struck him from the shadows like lightning, cutting off his exultant run. At that very moment, his pupils narrowed in horror, and before he could even block, he felt the world around him spinning in a whirlwind of pain and despair. A powerful blow landed right in his face, causing him to drop the precious eggs, which landed right in the hands of the attacker, and he himself collapsed, losing his balance. Before him stood the Money One, in shining divine armor, grinning mockingly, holding the precious eggs, ready to appropriate their power for himself. While the defeated enemy writhed in pain, the young warrior, clutching the trophy, nimbly leaped over the steep cliffs, striving for freedom with the spoils in his hands. The rival, turning purple with rage, shouted curses at the impudent youth, who, without looking back, ran away, clutching the treasure. Rushing forward without looking back, he rejoiced, glad that he had found himself in the right place at the right time, and that luck had smiled on him again. But right at the crossing, a menacing dragon suddenly emerged from the dark waters, its eyes blazing with anger and its scales sparkling like molten gold. Seeing the enraged beast in front of him, the guy froze, cursing because his carefully thought-out plan was collapsing before his eyes. A squad led by a fearsome demigod was rapidly approaching the young man, whose furious threats echoed throughout the gorge, promising the fugitive inevitable retribution. Squeezing one of the dragon eggs so hard that it cracked, he felt a daring plan that promised salvation instantly form in his head. With a well-aimed throw, he hurled the crushed egg straight into the demigod's hands, deliberately timing it so that he would unwittingly catch this treacherous trophy. The enemy, gritting his teeth and clutching the egg, growled with fury that he would crush the insolent man and take the second egg, no matter the cost. Suddenly, a substance began to flow from the crack, and the hero, stunned, froze, unable to understand what was happening. Realizing that the trickster had tricked him, the demigod roared in anger, his eyes blazing with rage, and the ground trembled beneath his feet. But it was too late. The broken egg attracted a golden dragon, which, opening its huge mouth, was rapidly advancing on the Son of God. Burning with anger, he shouted after the fleeing warrior, demanding that he return and meet his destiny, but his voice was drowned out by the dragon's roar. In the safety of his hideout, Hansen walked contentedly down the street, savoring the taste of the egg he had eaten, which had added 13 points of divine genes to his score. Smiling, he walked on, unaware of the danger and dreaming of glory, feeling that he was one step closer to his great goal. Suddenly, someone's strong hand grabbed him by the clothes, and the guy froze, feeling a chill of fear, foreshadowing a new adventure. Warrior Qin, blazing with anger, grabbed the guy by the clothes, reproaching him for having disappeared while she was scouring everywhere in search of him. Stunned by her rage, he looked at the girl with a confused look, unable to find words to justify his long absence. In the bright sparring room, they stood opposite each other, their gazes crossing like sparks before a furious battle. Qin, her eyes sparkling, beckoned him with her finger, challenging him that if he defeated her in combat, she would leave him alone forever. The warrior, scratching the back of his head in embarrassment, muttered that, against her divine genes and military experience, he had no chance. She grinned and offered a deal. If he could withstand 50 of her blows without divine powers, they would be settled and he would be free. The young man agreed, but added with a sly smile that he did not intend to simply stand there like a pillar, preparing to fight back in his own way. The warrior, adopting a graceful fighting stance, magnanimously allowed Hansen to strike the first blow, her eyes blazing with excitement. The guy swung his fist awkwardly and hit Qin's nose. She bent over in pain and snorted that he lacked grace and practice. Embarrassed and apologetic, he ran up to the girl, his heart pounding with fear and the desire to end this fight as quickly as possible. Glancing awkwardly at Qin, he dreamed only of escaping from this damned arena, where shame and humiliation awaited him again, like old acquaintances ready to stab him in the back. Straightening up abruptly, she roared with the fury of a tigress for him to begin the fight, her voice echoing around the arena, heralding the imminent storm. At that very second, The guy clenched his fist and punched her right in the nose again, as if trying to prove that the accidental blow was not his last word. Overcome with shame, he ran up to her with apologies, mumbling incoherently, but there was a hint of mockery in his eyes. Deep down, he chuckled quietly, knowing that such a chance would never come again, and he couldn't resist the temptation to provoke her once again. The girl's face distorted with rage, and turning into an enraged fury, she pounced on the young man like a storm, ready to wipe him off the face of the earth. Unleashing her anger, she dealt merciless blows one after another, each one saturated with her fury and thirst for revenge. It was a brutal war dance, with furious cries as she threw the boy around the arena like a football under her relentless blows. Receiving blow after blow, he thought of only one thing: how wrong he had been to underestimate her strength and fury, which now threatened to grind him into dust. After leaving the building, he thought that he shouldn't have provoked her anger, which was like an unstoppable hurricane that sweeps away everything in its path. Exhausted, he hobbled out of the building, bitterly realizing that he could not withstand even half of her 50 furious blows, each of which was imbued with power. This fight opened the young man's eyes. He was too weak to stand up to the formidable warrior, and now he must become stronger in order to one day challenge her worthy of it. In her luxurious apartment, the beautiful Chin, still feeling the heat of battle, decided to take a shower to wash away the sweat and tension accumulated after intense training. After the sparring, she felt a strange excitement. The young man had managed to deliver unexpected blows, and under the streams of hot water, she washed away her fatigue, thinking about him. The beauty, standing under the shower, wondered whether the guy had really hit her twice just by the element of surprise, or whether there was hidden potential in his movements. As she stepped out of the shower, Chin wondered how else she could test this young man, what tricks she could use to uncover his true abilities and weaknesses. Wrapped in a soft towel, she stepped out of the shower with a feeling of relief, as if she had washed away the heaviness of this day, filled with rage and tense moments of combat. Analyzing the footage of the fight, Chin carefully studied the guy's technique. His strikes, although powerful, were predictably formulaic, which made them vulnerable to her skill. His determination was astonishing. Each blow of the young man was explosive, filled with energy, as if he put all his will into them, striving to prove his strength. The fighter acted like a cold-blooded killer, focusing on one blow at a time, using his inconspicuous appearance to deceive his opponent and catch him off guard. Looking into his eyes, she felt that he did not look like a ruthless killer, and she was tormented by the agonizing question of whether he was hiding his talent or whether these were skillfully honed skills. Remembering all his tricks, she suddenly flared up with furious anger, realizing that forgiving him meant betraying herself. Approaching the majestic martial arts school, the boy froze, admiring its elegant building and the sparkling glass sign on the roof. An elderly master in a kimono, comfortably seated in a soft leather chair, told Han Sen that their school offered a variety of martial arts, including nuclear techniques. The hero, having carefully studied the options, pointed his finger decisively at the card with the name of the martial art, as if this choice was predetermined by fate. The surprised master, squinting, looked at the boy and warned him that the evil ghost technique was incredibly difficult, asking if he was physically ready. Han Sen, with unrivaled confidence, told the master not to worry and casually handed over the card to pay for the $1,000,000 course. Having mastered the ice muscle and jade bone techniques, the young man felt incredibly stronger and was convinced that the new technique would allow him to crush Chin. Entering the video viewing room, Han Sen's eyes widened in amazement. What he saw was unexpected, and it changed all his ideas about martial arts. The plump master in a kimono demonstrated strange, almost comical techniques, leaving the young man wondering in bewilderment whether he always taught so eccentrically. Scratching the air, touching invisible opponents, and awkwardly hugging imaginary figures, the master looked so comical that the young man began to doubt. The man in the kimono wriggled shamefully, looking like a playful kitten, causing the young man to blush with awkwardness, more like a theatrical performance. Feeling Spanish shame, the young man watched in horror as the master, whose absurd actions seemed like a nightmarish spectacle, unworthy of a real martial arts school. Imagining how the angry Qin Xuan would react if he used these ridiculous tactics, the young man couldn't help but shudder, anticipating her rage and contempt. Having spent all his money on training, he realized that he would have to master this strange technique, despite its absurdity and his growing frustration. While watching training videos, he began to think about the girl, wondering how their relationship would develop if she became his sparring partner. Tired and walking heavily, Han returned home, slowly opening the door, as if carrying on his shoulders the weight of disappointment from what he had seen at the martial arts school. After these days of hard training, the young man noticed that he himself began to resemble that plump master, copying his strange movements with frightening accuracy. The captured copper-toothed beast mutated faster and faster every day, and the hero eagerly awaited for it to reach the divine level, opening up new prospects. Looking at the beast with a smile, the young man anticipated what incredible divine genes he would be able to extract, or sell the beast if he wanted. As Han Sen set out to hunt, he pondered the fate of the Son of God, whom he had not seen for a long time, wondering what was hiding his disappearance, convinced that the enemy had lost track of him. He rejoiced at his good fortune and decided to study the divine beast soul given to Qin Xuan, hoping to unlock its hidden power. After summoning the soul, the young man was slightly disappointed to see only a cute little cat, whose fragile appearance seemed too weak for the great power of the divine beast. The hero's mouth dropped open in amazement, thinking that Qin Xuan was trying to make fun of him, as the tiny cat's soul looked more like a joke than a formidable weapon. It was a domestic spirit, a rarity among martial or wild spirits, and Han Sen wondered skeptically if this cute little cat could become more than just a decoration. Looking at the cute pet, who looked trustingly at his owner, the guy doubtfully wondered whether he would bring even the slightest benefit in the upcoming battles. Commanding his pet to attack a nearby monster, the young man watched in amazement as the kitten furiously rushed into battle like a tiny warrior full of unexpected courage. A herbivorous mutant, peacefully eating grass in a meadow, paid no attention to its surroundings until a tiny kitten rushed at it with unexpected audacity. The fearless little animal leaped forward and released its tiny claws, attacking the mutant with such fury as if the soul of a mighty predator was hidden within its tiny body. The agile beast, like a tennis player, hit the kitten with a powerful blow of its tail, and the baby, like a tiny ball, flew off to the side, leaving its owner in a mixture of amazement and concern. The kitten, rolling head over heels at the young man's feet, sent a wave of alarm through Han Sen, as this little brave fellow, despite his mutation, seemed so fragile and nearly died in the fight. Having come to his senses, the pet meowed pitifully at the feet of its owner, and the boy, looking at it, wondered if the warrior had deceived him by giving him such a weak spirit. Lifting the kitten by the scruff of the neck, the warrior examined it carefully, trying to understand whether this tiny creature contained even a drop of merciless power or whether it was just an illusion. Wondering if this domestic spirit was created for beauty, Han Sen bowed his head, realizing that in the coming battles he would most likely have to rely only on himself. With determination, the young man rushed towards the herbivorous beast, shouting to the kitten that this monster would be their dinner today, preparing to show his strength alone. The hunt had been going on for several days, and Han Sen and his pet had set up a cozy camp between the rocks, sheltering under a huge overhanging rock that promised protection from the dangers of the night. Having cooked a juicy piece of meat over the fire, the hero looked at it with gusto, anticipating how this trophy dinner would fill him with strength after a tiring hunt. Having nicknamed his new friend Three Eyes, the owner watched as the kitten, greedily looking at the meat, salivated like a real predator and not a house spirit. Marveling at the kitten's voracious appetite, the young man reflected that spirits usually only needed to return to the void to recover, but this little one was clearly an unusual creature. Looking at him devouring the meat, the boy wondered if this little spirit was hiding an incredible power that would manifest itself in the future. Still, Han Sen was delighted with his new companion and named him Miao Kun, whose devotion warmed his heart, promising to be a faithful friend in dangerous adventures. A sudden cry for help made the young man turn around sharply, his attention instantly drawn to a desperate cry that came from the side, foreshadowing trouble. The unknown man ran headlong for his life, his eyes filled with terror, and his breath caught in his throat as if he was running from death itself, which was chasing him on his heels. Seeing who was chasing him, Han Sen, without hesitation, decided to save his life by running, realizing that a clash with such an enemy would only lead to death. The stranger, holding out his hand, desperately begged Han Sen not to run away, but to help, promising a generous reward, but the fear in his voice only emphasized the hopelessness of the situation. The hero, without hesitation, shouted that the dead man did not need money and urged the stranger to speed up, otherwise they would both be crushed by the merciless force. While escaping, he noticed a thick vine hanging from a ledge on the rock and realized that by climbing it, they could hide from enemies who were unable to reach them from above. The stranger, out of breath, screamed at the young man to help and pull him out before his pursuers caught up, his voice trembling with fear and hope for salvation. Han Sen extended his hand to save the stranger, giving him a chance to grab hold and avoid certain death under the hooves of the beasts. With a light jump, he grabbed the young man's hand tightly, and the hero strained all his strength to pull him out and save him from impending death. Once at the top, the stranger, exhaling heavily, sincerely thanked the hero, his savior, whose kindness had given him a chance at life. The warrior, carefully examining the animals below, warned that it was better to lie low and wait until they left, so as not to take any risks. Offering a cigarette, the stranger began to tell how he had wandered for a long time, having lost the souls of animals and almost died of hunger, wandering in the wilderness. Having lit up, the young man noted to himself that the stranger's cigarettes were incredibly expensive, hinting that this man was clearly not an ordinary person, despite his haggard appearance. The stranger, looking at the warrior with curiosity, asked his name, and Han Sen, smiling slightly, introduced himself, strengthening the thin thread of trust between them. The man introduced himself as North and asked how far away Slava's refuge was, hoping that his travels would soon lead him to his long-awaited home and safety. Exhaling smoke, the hero replied that the Steel Armor's refuge was 10 days' journey away, but he had never heard of Glory's refuge, which surprised his companion. North, dumbfounded, asked again, not believing that he had wandered so far from his home, his eyes filled with a mixture of despair and determination to continue on his way. Having offered a generous payment for help in returning home, North heard from Han Sen that there was no need to rush. First, they needed to get along in order to trust each other. Laughing in agreement, North begged Han Sen for some food and water, his voice shaking with fatigue but filled with genuine hope. The enterprising guy immediately took out a glass of water and dried meat, and with a sly smile announced the price. 10,000 for the water and 10,000 for the meat, a good deal for both. North's eyes nearly popped out of his head in amazement. He didn't expect his savior to be such a clever trader in such a dangerous situation. The young man explained with a sneer that he had bought the food cheaply and would now sell it at a profit, and both would come out on top, since there were supplies in the wilderness. North, who turned out to be a cheerful guy, asked for more food with a smile, promising to return the debt with interest as soon as they reached a safe place. Hiding on a rocky outcrop for several days, the heroes noticed that their food and water supplies were dwindling, and the animals below were not leaving, as if waiting for the right moment to attack. The animals, not intending to retreat, were eager to take revenge on North for the killed young, their burning eyes following every movement of the people sitting on the rock. North looked desperately at his enemies and called them stubborn fools, his voice shaking with a mixture of anger and helplessness in the face of their persistent siege. Feeling a hanging tree root, Han Sen warned that supplies were running low and proposed a risky plan to climb to the other side of the cliff in search of salvation. He confidently climbed up, holding tightly to the tree root, and North, looking at him with concern, asked him to be careful so as not to fall into the abyss. The cliff turned out to be incredibly high. Its top seemed to support the clouds, and every meter was a test for the hero, where the slightest mistake could cost him his life. As Han Sen, who had never enjoyed climbing, screeched and cursed the steep ledges that were testing his strength and patience, he climbed the sheer cliffs. Having reached the next ledge, he froze, seeing before him a huge egg in a nest, its size astounding the imagination and causing awe before the unknown. Amazed, the young man had never seen such gigantic eggs. Even the eggs of a water dragon seemed tiny in comparison to this incredible miracle of nature. Wondering what kind of giant bird could have laid such an egg, Han Sen, not wanting to meet its owner, resolutely pierced the shell with a dagger to examine the contents. Carefully inserting the tube into the puncture, he greedily drank the contents of the egg, enjoying every sip as if it were an elixir promising him unprecedented strength. Having learned that the egg belonged to a divine blood beast, the boy decided to drink as much of its juice as possible in order to obtain divine genes. While waiting for Han Sen, North stood at the edge of the cliff, watching as a pack of wild animals below raised clouds of dust, their furious gazes promising nothing good. Seeing his friend descending the tree root, he exhaled joyfully, his heart filled with relief at the return of the savior he had already despaired of seeing. Sincerely worried about his friend, the young man began to ask why he had been absent for so long, and what secrets the top of this treacherous mountain concealed. Noticing Han Sen's rounded belly, North couldn't resist making a joke, cheerfully asking if he had managed to get pregnant during his mysterious ascent. The hero, brushing aside the jokes, told North about the phoenix eggs of divine blood he had found, handing him a glass of egg juice from which emanated the enticing aroma of power. The guy, not believing his eyes, greedily drank the contents of the glass in one gulp, his face lit up with delight, as if he had tasted something transcendental, bestowed by the gods themselves. With a smile, the young man asked if it was tasty, but with slight disappointment, he added that, unfortunately, he had not been able to extract the divine gene from the egg, despite all his efforts. North shook his friend's hand with gratitude, his eyes shining with genuine appreciation for the rescue and the incredible gift shared in a difficult moment. The hero sternly warned North that his reputation in the shelter had been severely damaged and advised him to stay away so as not to bring unnecessary trouble upon himself. North, without hesitation, replied that he did not care about rumors, because Han Sen acted as a loyal friend who saved his life, and that was above any gossip. Clenching his fists, he sternly declared that if anyone dared to hurt his friend, they would regret it, his voice trembling with determination to protect the boy at any cost. Having gotten out of trouble and saying goodbye, North happily waved his hand after him, and the hero thought that this open guy was worthy of true friendship. Having reached the city by high-speed train, the warrior got off at his station, his heart filled with joy from a successfully completed adventure and new opportunities. Walking home, Han Sen, with a satisfied smile, dreamed of a well-deserved rest, counting his divine genes, 18, which promised him great power in the future. Suddenly, someone stamped their foot loudly, clearly trying to get attention, and the young man turned around, feeling how tension instantly froze the air around him. Warrior Qin Xuan met him, her piercing gaze, full of stern determination, like a dagger, piercing him, promising a difficult meeting. Han Sen, feigning innocence, waved his hand at her with a smile, hinting that their meeting was a happy coincidence, although in his soul he was preparing for a test. The station master, not tolerating any objections, sternly ordered them to follow her, her voice cold as steel, not allowing the slightest disobedience. Frowning slightly, the young man followed her, mentally convincing himself that he was not afraid of the formidable warrior, although her aura made his heart beat faster. Qin Xuan led him to the training hall for sparring, where the air, filled with the spirit of past battles, seemed to foreshadow a new test of his skill. Meeting his rival's gaze, he thought that his demon possession technique had reached its peak, and now it would be easier to resist the warrior. Qin launched the first strike with a deft kick, her movement as swift as lightning, leaving her opponent no time to think. While dodging the attack, the boy mockingly asked Lady Qin if she had forgotten to warn her about the start of the fight, deliberately provoking her to throw her off balance. Ignoring the words, the warrior continued her furious attack, confident that she had figured out the guy's secret, his technique of surprise, and did not give him a chance to strike first. Noticing the warrior's blows as if foreseeing the future, Han Sen skillfully dodged again and again, his movements precise as a dancer reading the rhythm of the fight. Timing himself perfectly, he caught her leg in mid-flight, his grip swift as the claws of a predator ready to turn the tide of battle. The astonished warrior's mouth fell open in amazement, her carefully thought-out tactics shattered in an instant, leaving her vulnerable to the unexpected skill. Like a legendary wrestling master, the boy pinned Qinxuan to the arena floor, twisting her leg until she began to pound her fist on the floor in surrender. With a slight mockery, holding his grip tightly, he asked Lady Qin if she was giving up, his voice full of confidence, teasing her wounded pride. Growling like an enraged wolf, she furiously replied that Han Sen would never be able to defeat her in this life, her eyes blazing with unwavering determination. In anger, she released her soul, and a fiery beast full of rage appeared before Han Sen, causing his heart to clench at the power of the creature. Barely managing to jump away from the enraged fire lion, the boy shouted that this was a violation of the rules, but his voice was lost in the roar of the unstoppable beast. The fire lion's attacks continued, and with one powerful blow he smashed the arena wall, leaving chaos in his wake and causing everyone to freeze from his destructive power. Barely dodging the unstoppable onslaught, the warrior was shocked by the power of the beast's soul, whose fury threatened to crush everything that stood in its path, including himself. Having calmed down, Qinxuan stood before Han Sen, surrounded by flames, her eyes still blazing with anger, like a fire ready to incinerate everything around her. The guy, sitting on the floor and breathing heavily, realized that the warrior still surpassed him in all characteristics. Her strength was an unattainable peak. Exhausted, he looked at the girl as she turned away, trying to contain her anger, her tense figure radiating a power beyond his comprehension. Clutching his head, the young man felt ashamed, realizing that his overconfidence had made him look like a fool, unable to resist her overwhelming power. After coming to her senses, Qin thought that Han Sen's ability to anger her and deflect her blows showed that he had made significant progress since their last meeting. The warrior's anger did not leave her. She was sure that the guy was deliberately pretending to be weak, hiding his true strength, making her look like a fool. A few days later they clashed again, and the heroine, as before, attacked mercilessly. Her blows were swift, like a storm that knew no mercy. As she dealt crushing blows, she shouted at her opponent to fight harder, knowing that his true strength lay deeper than he wanted to show. She spent her days provoking the young man into quarrels and fights, but the cunning warrior used this as a unique opportunity to hone his fighting skills. As the sun set, illuminating the tops of the skyscrapers with the sunset light, their grueling training would come to an end, leaving Han Sen with thoughts of her unrelenting strength. Every time he was beaten after a battle, he thought that there was not a drop of tenderness in Qin, only a steel will and ruthlessness tempered in countless battles. Having left the building and taken only a few steps from the entrance, the boy heard someone calling him. The voice was loud and familiar, instantly making him turn around. The attractive Zhui Shi, waving her hand joyfully, announced that she had passed the initiation rite and could now enter the shelter, her eyes shining with anticipation of new adventures. Han Sen, surprised by how quickly time was flying, thought that Zhui Shi would grow up in the shelter just like him, learning its harsh laws and hidden possibilities. The flying car, descending vertically, hit them with a powerful stream of wind from its turbines, ruffling their hair. When the car door opened, a foot gracefully emerged from it, wearing an expensive shoe, hinting at the status and wealth of the owner who appeared next. The stylish young man, addressing Wei Shi as his sister, sternly asked her to use the home teleporter instead of public transport, out of concern for her safety. The girl, with a warm smile, introduced Han Sen to her brother as a childhood friend whose support had always been a pillar of strength for her in their shared past. The boy extended his hand in a friendly manner for a handshake, his open smile reflecting a sincere desire to establish contact with the brother of his childhood friend. But the man in dark glasses, looking coldly like a Terminator, declared that someone like Han Sen was unworthy of being his sister's friend, his voice harsh and unyielding. Shielding his sister, the man sternly ordered Han Sen not to approach her, threatening that otherwise he would not stand on ceremony. His tone did not tolerate objections. Asking back boldly, Han Sen mockingly asked if he was the one being threatened, or if the Terminator had simply made a mistake, his eyes sparkling with challenge and confidence. Throwing an icy glance at the young man, the man ordered him to keep quiet, his voice full of arrogance, as if he already considered the boy a defeated opponent. Deciding to teach the impudent youth a lesson, the man launched a swift kick, his movement fast and precise, promising a serious lesson for the enemy. Recognizing the demon possession technique, Sen was amazed by the skill, as even Qin Xuan would have envied such art, executed with frightening precision. Anticipating the enemy's movement, the warrior easily dodged the attack and pounced on the enemy with lightning speed, his reaction similar to the instinct of a predator. Grabbing his enemy by the collar and throat, Khan threw him to the floor with the ease of a soft toy, demonstrating a strength no one suspected. The blow was so powerful that the Terminator's glasses flew off and his breathing was momentarily interrupted, leaving him helplessly gasping for breath from the unexpected defeat. Not expecting such resistance, the man screamed in panic, his hysterical voice echoing through the street, betraying his fear of the enemy's power. Zushi, watching the fight in horror, screamed at Senu, begging him to stop, her voice trembling with fear for both her brother and her childhood friend at the same time. Rising to his feet, the defeated enemy threw a couple of insulting phrases at the boy, but his words, full of malice, were only reflected in the young man's calm confidence. Ignoring the insults, the hero turned to Zexi, gently reassuring her that her brother was strong enough and would not fall apart from one fall, despite his anger. Having defended his honor, the warrior calmly headed home, telling Zexi that they would have dinner another time, since the late hour was no longer conducive to feasting. Gritting his teeth in rage, the girl's brother quietly growled Han Sen's name, his voice trembling with suppressed anger, promising a new meeting with this impudent youth. Having finally come to his senses, he muttered that he was a very interesting guy, but Shui Shi asked not to touch him, assuring him that he did not want a conflict. With a sly grin, as if he was plotting something devious, the brother asked Shui to invite Sen to dinner to pay him back for the recent skirmish. The puzzled sister looked at her brother, not understanding what male interests were at odds in this conflict, but her intuition told her that it was not about a simple dinner. Sitting at his computer, the hero scoured the forum for deals, as an unsuccessful hunt in the mountains had deprived him of the opportunity to earn money from animals. On the forum, he came across an ad from North who was looking for animals and mutant blood, clearly willing to pay handsomely for the rare trophies so valuable in the shelter. Mutant blood and beasts were in short supply, and the young man realized that obtaining them would not be easy, but this opened up the chance for a profitable deal with his new acquaintance. Among the ads, he noticed a request for an escort, which required only one thing: to single-handedly deal with 10 primitive creatures which suited his skills. The advertisement promised 10,000 a day and 150,000 at the end of the contract, and Han Sen, having done the calculations, decided that this was a very generous offer. For the task, the warrior needed to find a suitable weapon, and he remembered with regret the broken spear of the Bronze Crescent, which had served him faithfully in battle. Unexpectedly, he stumbled upon a tempting offer: a Black Knight bow and spearhead arrows, the perfect hunting combination that promises devastating power. The bow and arrows had tremendous killing power, but suspiciously, the listing had been on the forum for a long time, and the guy wondered why no one was rushing to buy such a formidable weapon. The Black Knight bow had a range of 800 meters and could penetrate armor at 300 meters, but it required 7 units of strength, which is why it was likely avoided. After assessing his strength, the hero realized that the ice muscle and jade bone technique had raised his stat to 8, which was enough to use a powerful bow. With $1 million in his pocket, he wrote to the seller, but there was no answer, and he began to doubt whether his funds were enough to buy such a rare weapon. Leaning back in his chair, he wondered if the seller was unhappy with the price or simply offline, and his interlocutor's silence was causing him growing anxiety. Just as the guy was about to give up on this idea, the signal of an incoming message startled him, making his heart beat faster with anticipation. The seller agreed and sent the bow through the website. Han Sen, jubilant with his success, could not contain his delight, anticipating how this weapon would strengthen him in the upcoming trials. The next day, the express delivery courier handed over the package, asking for a signature, and the guy eagerly began unpacking his new, formidable acquisition. Having unpacked the bow, he decided to test it immediately, trembling as he took hold of the bowstring to check how powerful this weapon would be. Easily pulling the bowstring to its maximum with 2 fingers, the warrior was convinced that the technique of the icy muscles had not failed, granting him strength worthy of this legendary bow. Trying to take aim, he noted that the bow was a perfect fit for his height, as if made for his hand, promising accuracy and power in every shot. Having gained the advantage of long-range combat, he was glad that he could now avoid close combat, leading divine beings away from under the nose of the Son of God himself from a safe distance. A few days later, Han Sen arrived at the vast square between the skyscrapers in the city center, where, according to the announcement, his new mission was to begin. Along the way, he purchased 20 Thunderbolt alloy arrows and 20 Airflow series arrows, providing himself with a powerful arsenal for the upcoming mission. Just in case, I grabbed 6 old arrows made from peak alloy, deciding that the spare ones could be decisive at a critical moment in the hunt. Arriving at the meeting place, the young man saw a crowd of people and thought with annoyance that if he had known about hiring others, he would have refused, because the more people, the more trouble. Suddenly, a blond boy jumped out from the buzzing crowd, boldly pointing his finger at Han Sen and shouting that it was he, the very same guy who allegedly plunged a knife into Qin Xuan's thigh. The men around him mocked the boy, claiming that if he went with them, he, the weak one, would have to be protected, not noticing how his brother stood silently behind them. The hero, burning with anger, his eyes flashed, his eyebrows met in a sullen crease, and he already bitterly regretted that he had gotten involved in this dubious adventure, which promised only trouble. Coming close to the mockers, the boy stood up straight, his gaze blazing with challenge as he patiently waited for their caustic laughter to finally die down, preparing to fight back. But the fair-haired guy, who turned out to be the customer, asked with a narrowed eye whether Han Sen was really the man the whole area was buzzing about, his voice trembling with curiosity. The young man, pressing his lips together in annoyance, coldly replied that he would leave if the client considered him unworthy, and a mixture of resentment and determination to prove otherwise splashed in his eyes. The customer, Master Yuan, without a moment's hesitation, declared that this warrior would stay and become his personal bodyguard, ignoring the surprised looks and murmurs of the crowd. The other warriors immediately flared up with indignation, insisting that he was an unreliable psychopath who would run away at the first sign of danger, but their protests sounded ever quieter before the will of the master. Yuan firmly handed the contract to Han Sen, declaring that he wanted to go only with him, and that the dissatisfied warriors could look for other work if they were not satisfied with his choice. The young man, without delving into the details of the contract, casually signed it, confident that it was a trivial matter, unaware of the trials that awaited him ahead. A soldier standing nearby grinned and whispered to Hansen that he was a lucky man, but he should just try to let Master Yuan down, otherwise he would regret ever taking on this matter. Making their way through the dense forest, the squad felt a light breeze ruffling the treetops and leaves falling silently to the floor. They moved slowly along a wide path surrounded by tall trees, whose shadows fell on the ground like guards protecting their path from unseen threats. One of the soldiers, possessing a keen eye, suddenly noticed a primitive creature in the bushes, flashing among the branches like a ghost creeping in the darkness of the forest. The creature moved swiftly and silently, like a gust of wind, deftly hiding in the thick shadows of the trees, leaving only the slight sway of the leaves behind it. The 3 soldiers, with loud shouts and a furious desire to protect Master Yuan, rushed forward, drawing their weapons and charging into the thicket with fearless determination. Sen Han, eager to prove his valor, resolutely drew an arrow from his quiver, preparing to hit the target and earn the respect of his stern comrades. He took careful aim and fired his bow, but to his chagrin, the arrow only struck the tree trunk with a dull thud, missing the swift creature. Behind him, an indignant cry was heard from one of the soldiers, who sarcastically said that this maniac did not know how to shoot at all and was only disgracing the squad. Ignoring the ridicule, the boy, with stubborn determination, took out a new arrow, realizing that his bow was strong and required more strength for an accurate shot. The annoying soldier, pestering Han Sen with caustic questions, reproached him for not being able to hit the target even from 20 meters away, mocking his skills as an archer. The impudent boy, without relenting, called the archer a disgrace, sarcastically asking how he could train at all, being, in his opinion, at such a high level. Behind the young man's back, his brother Han Ho, not believing in his abilities, quietly whispered to him to remain silent and not to betray his brother. Otherwise, they would both face shame in the eyes of the squad. Approaching the gloomy cave, the squad noticed 3 wild creatures of a primitive appearance, their eyes glowing with malice, ready to attack the intruders. The archer, having taken a strategic position on a rock ledge, held his bow, ready to cover his comrades if the wild creatures proved too dangerous for the squad. Master Yuan was genuinely delighted at the chance to stain his blade with blood and sternly ordered the mercenaries not to interfere, wanting to deal with the enemies. The young masters, eagerly throwing themselves into battle, deftly defeated the spotted beasts one after another, their blades sparkling in the rays of the sun, demonstrating the skill of an elite school. Han Sen, watching the fight, realized that these masters were well trained, and they only lacked combat experience to become truly unrivaled fighters. After a few days of training, they had become much more proficient with their weapons, living up to their reputation as an elite school whose initial training was a cut above the average. One of the masters, standing over the defeated beasts, looked at the trophies with genuine joy, proud of the victory and the new experience that strengthened his confidence in his abilities. To everyone's surprise, one of the defeated monsters suddenly opened its eye, revealing itself to be alive, and jumped up with a furious roar, ready to pounce on the unsuspecting youth. With its last strength, the beast leaped at the master, its claws sparkling in the sun's rays, and the squad froze, sensing the inevitable death of the young warrior under the onslaught of the wild beast. The 3 mercenaries stood rooted to the spot, frozen in horror, certain that the master had met his end, their swords hanging limply in their hands in the face of imminent tragedy. The enemy, now dangerously close, extended his claws, preparing to tear Qin apart, and Master Yuan, screaming in despair, tried to save his friend, but was too far away. The only one who could save the young man was Han Sen, and without wasting a second, he released the arrow with lightning speed, putting all his concentration and skill into the shot. With a precise shot, he hit the spotted beast in flight right in the eye, the arrow epically getting stuck in the skull. The creature, with a death rattle, collapsed a step away from the master, never having achieved its goal. Now, the beast was truly dead. At that very moment, the mercenaries, having come to their senses, furiously attacked the corpse of the monster, plunging their swords into the already lifeless body, as if pouring out their fear and anger. Master Yuan ran up to his frightened friend and extended his hand, helping him up, his face expressing a mixture of relief and concern for his comrade. The young man, trembling from the experience, confirmed that he was safe and sound, but admitted that he was scared to death, still feeling the cold claws on his neck. One of the mercenaries, pointing his finger at Han Sen, angrily shouted, reproaching him for almost wounding the master with his arrow, and Han Ho, nodding along, insisted that such shots were too dangerous. The enraged mercenaries chased the archer away, telling him to get away, their voices full of contempt and intolerance towards the young man. One of the soldiers, speaking on behalf of the master, rudely ordered the young man to get lost, threatening him with reprisals if he did not immediately leave their unit. Hearing this, Master Yuan flew into a rage, grabbing the insolent soldier by the throat, and with cold determination ordered him to leave himself, his eyes blazing with anger. Shouting indignantly, Yuan accused his subordinate of cowardice, reminding him how they had stood numb while Qin was on the brink of death, and their inaction had almost cost their friend his life. Having disgraced the warrior in front of everyone, Yuan sternly ordered him never to appear again, banishing him in disgrace for betrayal and cowardice. The cunning warrior, not giving in, began to argue, citing the contract, declaring that the exile violated its terms, and Yuan was obliged to pay the full amount of compensation. Without turning around, the gentleman contemptuously threw the wad of money into the air so that the bills scattered around, forcing the warrior to humiliatingly collect them from the ground. As he passed by Han Sen, the exiled soldier exchanged caustic pleasantries with him, angrily warning him that their paths would cross again and he would avenge the humiliation. Approaching the archer, Qin sincerely thanked him for saving his life, and the squad, having stopped calling the guy a maniac, now treated him with the respect he deserved. Young Master Qin, being perceptive, noticed that the hero wielded the doomed soul weapon, which required at least the 7th level of mastery, which caused everyone to be surprised. The master in steel armor was very surprised to learn that the doomed soul bow required remarkable strength, and his eyes widened in respect for the archer's skill. To clarify, the guy added that the minimum force was only enough to pull the bowstring, but for an accurate shot, exceptional skill was needed, which Han Sen clearly possessed. Shaking the young man's hand firmly, Master Yuan, with a warm smile, promised to definitely contact him again, appreciating his skill and courage in battle. The young man hoped that the client would recognize the power of the doomed soul bow when hiring him, and was glad to work with such an insightful and far-sighted master. A few days later, having reached the steel armor's refuge, the young man, as expected, faced new problems waiting for him at the gate. The exiled mercenary, upon meeting Sen, angrily reproached him, claiming that because of him, he had lost the chance to earn more money, and his eyes were burning with a thirst for revenge. Demonstratively flexing his fist, the exile, surrounded by his friends, menacingly advanced on the hero, ready to pay for the past humiliation. Pulling out a dagger, sharp as a razor, the mercenary rushed at the young man with fury, intending to get even with his accomplices for all the insults he had given them. Han Ho, Hansen's brother, stood among the gang and watched intently as they were going on. He valued his reputation and could not help his brother. With astonishing speed, the young man deftly dodged the enemy's attack, his movements invisible to the eye, like a shadow, causing the attacker to freeze in surprise. At the same moment, he masterfully snatched the dagger from the hand of the impudent Liu Feng, disarming him with one precise movement and depriving him of the ability to resist. To everyone's surprise, Han Sen knocked his opponent to the ground, holding him in an iron grip, demonstrating a strength no one had suspected. Han Ho, stunned by his brother's speed, looked at him in confusion, not understanding how he could achieve such incredible agility and skill. Liu Feng's henchmen, dumbfounded by what was happening, looked at each other, not believing that the so-called maniac was able to defeat their leader, whose strength reached the level of the 7th level. Writhing in pain from the grip, he desperately pleaded with his accomplices for help, his voice shaking with fear and humiliation in the face of defeat. Ignoring the screams, Han Sen continued to twist his enemy's arm with cold determination, enjoying every moment of his revenge. Enraged by Liu Feng, the archer scornfully chided him for his talkativeness, adding that he talked too much for a man lying in the dust. 3 soldiers, drawing their swords, rushed furiously at the young man, burning with the desire to avenge the humiliation of their leader, their blades sparkling in the rays of the sun. The warrior, holding Liu Feng until the last moment, enjoyed his revenge as the enemies approached him. The warrior's swift, slashing movements, like flashes of light, left his enemies frozen in amazement, their attacks frozen before his elusive agility. In his hands was a rare dagger, perfectly balanced, its blade sparkling as if forged from stars, causing awe in all who saw it. The enemy's blades shattered like shards of a broken mirror, leaving them bewildered and unable to understand how Han Sen had managed to defeat them so easily. Having examined the dagger, The young man was surprised to recognize it as a rare weapon from the Cutting Steel series, whose fame thundered among the masters of blade art. Han-ho frowned and looked at his brother with disbelief, unable to believe that he had become the owner of such a powerful and legendary weapon. He recalled how Hansen had once been unable to cope even with primitive creatures, hunting only black beetles outside the city walls. Leaning over the fallen Liu Feng, the warrior showed him the blade, and with a cold grin, declared that such a knife was too good for him and now belonged to the winner. Having achieved a triumphant victory, he rightfully seized the blade, cementing his superiority over the enemy, whose pride was trampled in the dust. Walking confidently home, Hansen suddenly froze, hearing a familiar voice, which, like an echo of the past, made him alert and look around. Stopping abruptly, he met the gaze of a new enemy, whose appearance promised another test, ready to test his strength and resolve. The Luo leader, sitting proudly on his warhorse, contemptuously rebuked Sen for daring to take away his weapons and humiliate his men, his voice booming like thunder. The defeated Liu Feng, writhing in pain, begged his leader to take revenge on his offender, but his pitiful cries only irritated the leader. Luo, realizing that revenge would not bring honor, contemptuously called Liu Feng a useless fool whose weakness had disgraced the squad in front of an insolent enemy. Taking out a long whip and waving it threateningly from his horse, he declared with cold determination in his eyes that he would introduce the young man to death, and his whip cut through the air. Snatching his new dagger, cutting steel, from its sheath, he deflected the blows of the whip with skill, his movements as precise as a dance with the blade. Blocking the attacks, the warrior realized that Luo was a formidable opponent with a strength of level 9, whose power was legendary, and fighting him required complete concentration. Luo, continuing to attack, couldn't believe that Han, a former loser, was blocking his whip so easily, and the rage in his heart flared up with each block. In the midst of the battle, he realized that the boy could not be left alive, because his incredible potential made him a dangerous enemy, capable of shaking his leadership. Shouting that the youth was seeking death himself, the rider lashed out furiously with his whip, each blow filled with hatred, but the youth did not lose his composure in the face of the onslaught. Possessing supernatural speed, he chose the moment between the blows of the whip, drew his bow with lightning speed, loaded an arrow, and prepared for the decisive shot. The enemy certainly didn't expect this. His mouth gaped as he realized that if Han Sen let go of the bowstring, his life would end under the precise shot of the daring archer. Han Ho, amazed, could not believe that his brother dared to challenge Luo Tianyang himself, whose fame thundered among the warriors. The subordinates, frozen in anticipation, could not take their eyes off the fight, amazed at the madman who dared to threaten one of the best fighters chosen by the gods. The young man, straining with all his strength, held the bowstring at its limit, ready to kill Luo with one arrow if he took even a step, his gaze hard as steel. Qin Shen suddenly appeared and intervened decisively, ordering the boy to lower his bow. Her voice was commanding and did not tolerate objections. Just as sternly, she ordered Luo, her subordinate, to lower the whip, her eyes blazing with anger, demanding immediate submission from both warriors. A bead of sweat slowly trickled down Han Sen's cheek, betraying the immense tension with which he held the bowstring taut, ready for the decisive moment. Both warriors reluctantly lowered their weapons as ordered, but the tension between them continued to spark like lightning in the air. Luo, blazing with pride, furiously accused the guy, reminding Qin that he had already shown disrespect to her, and now to him, and deserved to die. The warrior, not tolerating insolence, immediately used powerful restraining magic, silencing Luo, its power suppressing his arrogance. Qin Xuan's powerful magical attack knocked the whip out of Luo's hands, causing him to fall from his horse in disgrace and hit the pavement painfully, causing a commotion among his underlings. Luo's henchmen ran up to their commander and quickly helped him up, as he winced in pain and tried to salvage the remnants of his pride. Qin, her green eyes flashing, said with authority that she would deal with her people herself, and no one dared interfere in her affairs. Her voice was cold as steel. As she passed Han Sen, She briefly motioned for him to follow her, her tone brooking no argument, her steps confident and quick. Luo's pride was trampled, and he watched them go with an offended look, clenching his fists, swearing to avenge his humiliation in front of everyone. The soldiers watching the scene were now whispering that Han Sen, now the warrior's new favorite, had changed their opinion of him dramatically. Luo, burning with rage, gritted his teeth, mentally vowing that he would not leave the humiliation unanswered and would find a way to get even with the offender. Qin brought the young man to her office in the city center, a majestic building with marble columns that exuded the power and grandeur of her organization. She invited the warrior to join her elite squad of archers, but the young man, stubbornly shaking his head, flatly refused her tempting offer. Seeing how skillfully he wielded the spirit of destiny Bao, Qin resorted to trickery, warning that Luo Tianyan would not leave him alone without her protection. Not giving in to the woman's wiles, the boy stubbornly refused, but she persistently convinced him that her unit would be the best school for him and would open the doors to a military school. Turning around, he answered doubtfully that he was not ready for military school, since his physical fitness left much to be desired, and he did not see himself in the army. Qin, supporting him, confidently stated that for an ordinary person this was difficult, but for him, who underestimated himself, such trials were mere trifles. Looking at her with bewilderment, the young man did not understand what she meant. Questions about her strange confidence swarmed in his head. The warrior sincerely believed that he, who seemed like a newcomer, was in fact worth a dozen warriors and could become a valuable asset for her team. Recalling the incident with the dagger, the guy asked if she was angry, which caused a storm of emotions. Qin, flaring up, demanded that she never mention it again. She explained that without military training and a title, he had no future in the army, and was doomed to remain a simple private with no chance of greatness. With a sly smile, Khan asked why she was so sure that he would not receive a noble title, since he already had a plan for his rise. A plan was brewing in his head, perfecting the icebone technique and obtaining divine genes through a mysterious crystal that promised unprecedented power. Qin's patience snapped, and grabbing the young man by the collar, she shouted that if she said he couldn't do it, then he was doomed to fail. The guy, deciding not to test Qin's patience, reluctantly agreed to join her squad, thinking that arguing with this determined woman would be more expensive. Returning home, he collapsed exhausted on the bed, wondering why Qin was so insistent, suspecting a hidden conspiracy. A sudden knock on the door made him start in surprise, as few people knew where he lived, and he cautiously walked towards the door. Seeing his mother, the son greeted her with a warm smile and, worried by her sudden visit, asked what had happened and if everything was okay. Luo Sulan explained that his sister had been accepted into school and needed to be taken to class tomorrow, but she herself had no time due to an urgent trip. She added that Han Sen was too busy to contact, but the money he left behind helped her sister get into a good school. The son, delighted by the news, knew that St. Walter's School, although not elite, had an excellent reputation and quality education. The next day, having met his sister, the young man brought her to the school steps and, stopping, decided to give the girl some advice to support her confidence. He kindly told his sister that St. Walter's School was known for its friendly atmosphere and she would certainly find true friends there. He stroked his sister's head and advised her to be polite and take her time, and if someone offended her, just tell her brother and he would sort it out. Sister Yan, looking at her brother with love in her wide-open eyes, beamed with joy, feeling his support before school. Together they approached the majestic arch of St. Walter's School, which led to the courtyard where the students were already gathering. Yan noticed a young couple walking towards them and pointed to a man who looked strikingly like their Uncle who was holding a small child in his arms. Sen looked closely at his uncle, his companion and the child, his gaze lingering as if he had noticed something curious that made him suspicious. Uncle frowned and asked the young man what they were doing at the school, to which he calmly replied that he had simply brought Yan to school. The uncle began to rudely reproach the boy, declaring that tuition at this school costs millions, and demanded to explain where they got such money. Pointing his finger rudely at Han Sen, declared that all their money belonged to him too, threatening to be rude if the young man did not share with him. The hero frowned and sharply reproached his uncle, reminding him that he had not bothered to read the contract, which clearly stated that he was to pay 2 million and not to approach the family. Enraged, clenched his fist and shouted, accusing the young man of cheating and threatening to immediately go to their mother to deal with him. Sen responded sternly, saying that he had every right to use weapons if dared to invade private property, his voice cold and decisive. The clumsy Uncle roared with rage, raised his fist, shouting that Han Sen, an insolent youth, did not dare to contradict him, and rushed forward, determined to strike. The warrior caught the flying fist with ease, clenching it tightly in his hand, demonstrating confidence and skill that took by surprise. Using a simple self-defense technique, he easily pinned the fat to the sidewalk like a sack of potatoes, leaving him writhing in pain. Standing over the defeated villain, the boy sternly warned that if dared to come to his home, he would say goodbye to life without any regret. Little Yan, looking at her older brother with admiration, was proud of him, thinking that he was magnificent, a real hero, the protector of their family. Era's companion, grabbing her son in her arms, hurried to school, whispering reassurance to him that she would soon call the police to deal with the enemy. The guy holding a recording device told with a grin that he filmed him with a beautiful girl and a child, hinting that wife would be curious. The fat man, bursting into obscene language, demanded that the recording be deleted, his face burning with anger, but he was powerless against the strong warrior. As he reached for the device, the young man deftly grabbed his arm, twisting it hard, causing his uncle to groan again in pain and humiliation. Looking at the helpless with a smile, Han Sen noted that they were still a family and could come to an agreement. He would delete the recording if his uncle transferred 2 million to him. Cold sweat broke out on face. He muttered that this was some kind of nonsense, but his eyes betrayed his fear of the determined and relentless warrior. The guy, tightening his grip on arm, coldly demanded that the 2 million be transferred right now, leaving the scoundrel no chance to object. With a trembling hand and a heavy heart, he agreed and made the translation, his face twisted in humiliation and anger, but he was powerless against Han Sen. As he left, the guy grinned and said he would delete the video if he was in a good mood, and warned not to come to his house to avoid problems. Having received what he deserved, the man remained sitting on the sidewalk, clutching his injured arm, his gaze full of impotent rage and humiliation. Watching his nephew leave, he shouted a few insulting phrases after him, promising that he would regret his impudent act. Looking at the marks on his hand, wondered when Hansen had become so tough, because before he was quiet and did not show such anger. Yan, unfortunately, was late for class, but as he walked along the road, the boy was worried that he had frightened his sister with a fight, and his heart sank with guilt. Clutching his head, he swore to himself that he would never use force in front of his sister again, because she was still young and should not see violence. Passing by the physical training center, he decided to go in to test his skills, honed by days of training in the ice muscle technique. The Combat Physical Training Center contained halls with a variety of challenges, from simple courses to complex rooms designed to test the warrior's skills. The young warrior Zhao Boshan, burning with ambition, passed the tests, striving to reach the AA level and become the captain of a starship. When he reached the testing room, he found it occupied and sighed sullenly. Looking at the red signal of the indicator, because he came to an empty hall, he deliberately lowered his hands, envious of his opponent's luck. Deciding not to waste any time, Zhao activated the screen to observe the proceedings in the room, his curiosity overcoming his irritation at the wait. On the screen, the young man, using the soul of the beast, furiously broke through hordes of robots. His movements were swift, but Zhao considered this tactic useless. He believed that for a perfect result, he needed to overcome 100 meters of robots, and his own record was only 76 meters, and he doubted the stranger's success. He was sure that a warrior with the soul of a beast would not get further than 80 meters, and his tactics were doomed to fail against such a dense wave of machines. But Han Sen, having transformed into a centaur, tore through all the robots with unprecedented power, leaving only debris behind. Seeing the warrior's result on the monitor, Zhao Boshan froze, his pupils narrowed in shock, and his confidence gave way to amazement at the hero's skill. The warrior received an SSS rating for the test, completing the 100-meter robot run in an incredible 7.8 seconds, setting a record that shocked everyone at the training center. Zhao Boshan's mouth gaped open, and he stood there in amazement, not believing that anyone could defeat the robots in such a short time, thinking it was impossible. All the robots were completely destroyed, their fragments littering the floor, testifying to the crushing power of the unknown warrior who had passed the test. The boy, stunned, wondered who this mysterious warrior was, whose incredible speed and strength had turned his idea of the capabilities of fighters upside down. Rumors spread like wildfire throughout the city, and within hours, everyone was discussing how Money Brother B had beaten the robots in less than 8 seconds. The warriors whispered that, despite the strength of the beast's soul, B allegedly stole it from the Son of God and was capable of snatching prey from anyone right from under their nose. The luxurious seaside villa, surrounded by palm trees, bananas, and coconuts, offered breathtaking views that created the atmosphere of a tropical paradise. After getting out of the shower, Tang Zhenliu asked Lin Feng why he called him so urgently, demanding that he get out of the shower immediately. Showing the robot's passing record on the monitor, Lin Feng asked Tan if he knew the guy whose result had shocked everyone in the center. Although the face could not be seen in the video, analysis showed that this warrior would soon accumulate all genes except the divine one, becoming nearly invincible. The young man also noticed that the warrior in the video masterfully used nuclear gene techniques and beast souls, demonstrating a power capable of crushing any opponent. Tang Zhenliu, in a fit of rage, interrupted Lin Feng, demanding that he stop speculating and simply state the name of the mysterious warrior whose power had alarmed him so much. Dreaming of reaching the second level of the god's refuge, he saw the record holder as a threat that could prevent him from winning the prestigious competition. Reasoning, he assumed that a warrior with such skills clearly had a complex origin, perhaps connected to the military or elite clans. Having calmed down, Tan said with a cold smile that he was controlling his anger and his words should not be taken seriously, but his eyes betrayed anxiety. Lin Feng, looking closely at the screen, was filled with curiosity, realizing that a warrior with such power could radically change the balance of power in the shelter of the gods. A few days later, at the transfer station, Han Sen was already waiting for Qinxuan's man. She called him to report on her plans. Having not seen him for several days, she looked for the guy and imperiously ordered him to return immediately, not tolerating the slightest delay. Sighing resignedly, Khan trudged through the station, regretting that he could not contradict this inexorable woman, whose will was stronger than his resistance. Reprimanding him for his silence and evasiveness, Qin declared that he was now her man, and she must know where he was and what he was doing, without accepting excuses. The warrior, unwilling to listen to excuses, commanded Han Sen to immediately go to Yanman to officially join the archery squad. She urgently needed to leave for the Star Group, and she, glancing at the guy, ordered him not to delay with the paperwork and to complete everything before her return. Turning around, she sternly reminded him that he owed her his entry into the squad and was under her protection as long as he followed her orders. Scratching the back of his head with a sly grin, the young man thanked Qin, but in his heart, he was wondering how to respond to her persistence and commanding tone. He felt that Qin was genuinely concerned about him, protecting him, and suspected that perhaps she cared about him, which made him smile. Deep down, he knew that one day he would reveal the truth to her, that he was a warrior with a beast soul, wielding ultra-nuclear technology and the strength of 9. The soldier, politely opening the door, invited the recruit to enter the office. His manners were courteous, but there was a sense of strict discipline in his voice. Upon entering, Han greeted the leader, Yang Man, warmly, and informed him that Qin Xuan had sent him to officially join the squad. Yan Man, wearing a tight uniform, was already waiting for him, glancing impatiently at her watch, her seductive appearance contrasting with the stern expression on her face. Looking sternly at the guy, she coldly noted that he was 10 seconds late, and her gaze demanded an explanation for such a blatant delay. Hansen, scratching his head in confusion, replied that he had not wanted to be late, but had been delayed by Tsin, whose orders did not tolerate objections. The incredibly demanding Yang contemptuously reproached the warrior for hiding behind others, and her stern gaze did not promise any indulgences. Handing him a form to fill out, she coldly told him to hurry, her tone sharp and her movements emphasizing her impatience. As he filled out the paperwork, the boy wondered who this woman was and why she was so hostile, since he had done nothing to deserve her dislike. When she coquettishly asked about his skills, citing Chin's recommendation, the warrior considered whether to reveal the truth about his strength to her, but decided to remain silent. Embarrassed by his boss's enormous cleavage, the man kept losing track of what he was doing while filling out the form. He became distracted and felt tense. After receiving the completed form, Yanman coldly informed him that he had to be in the training hall at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning without the slightest delay. Suddenly, the holographic projector came to life, and Qin Xuan appeared, her hologram radiating authority, demanding immediate attention. She ordered them both to come to her office without delay, her voice stern and her intentions a mystery. On the huge hanging screen, Qin played the viral video of Money Brother that had taken the internet by storm, causing everyone to talk about it. In the video, a warrior with the soul of a beast crushed robots to smithereens, his movements like a hurricane, leaving only debris and chaos. Hansen stared at the screen in panic, his heart pounding with fear as his secret was about to be revealed. Qin and Yang recognized the warrior as Money Brother, but fortunately, his face remained indistinguishable in the video, hidden in the heat of battle. With a sigh of relief, Hansen discreetly wiped sweat from his cheek, glad that his identity had remained in the shadows despite the viral video. Qin concluded the video revealed that the warrior possessed not only divine soul beast armor, but also an ultra-nuclear technique of incredible power. She added that the filming took place at the Star River Physical Training Center, and this person must be found at any cost for their unit. Yanman was skeptical that Star River had no outstanding talents, and it was hard to believe that such a warrior could appear there. Qin firmly stated that if Denezhny joined them, then there would be no need to cooperate with the Son of God to hunt divine beasts. Looking at Qin, the guy thought, she was clearly in desperate need of talents to strengthen the squad and achieve superiority in the upcoming missions. With a sly smile to distract them, the young man said with a hint of humor that Denezhny was a loner, and drawing him into the squad would not be an easy task. The girls smiled, and the warrior, with a mischievous sparkle in her eyes, assured the young man that they had their own tricks to attract any man. Imagining Yang Man in all her seductive beauty, the guy thought with alarm that these women seemed to have completely lost their minds, starting strange games. Having reached his quiet neighborhood, the soldier dreamed of rest, because the next morning at 6 a.m. he had to report to training camp. In the cage, the mutant continued to evolve, and Khan knew that in just a little while he would become a beast of divine blood, full of unprecedented power. Looking at the copper-toothed wolf with a smile, the hero mentally calculated that he only had a few days left to wait, and his plan would soon come to fruition. Determined not to be late, the young man arrived at the rifle group's training camp a little early to make a good impression. Walking slowly through the center, he carefully examined the training halls where archers honed their skills with concentrated precision. Among the archers, the warrior noticed a young boy, Su Xiaoqiao, whose glasses with huge lenses made him stand out from the rest. Coming closer, Han asked Su in a friendly manner if he was in the rifle group, hoping to start a conversation with him. Turning around, the young man looked at the stranger in bewilderment, not recognizing him, because he didn't know him at all. The hero, realizing he had made a mistake, knew him only as Money Brother Bai, and his real name could arouse suspicion. Having quickly wriggled out of it, he explained to the young man with a charming smile that he was a celebrity, known to everyone thanks to the exploits of Denezhny. After laughing at this, the guy asked if Khan was also joining the rifle group and warned that the training here was incredibly difficult. Realizing that they were now on the same team, he whispered a warning to the warrior about Yan Man, hinting that she was weak in the front and liked to flirt. The warrior nodded and confirmed that he had already met with Yang while filling out the questionnaire and noticed that she was indeed behaving rather strangely. Suddenly, a sharp female voice was heard behind them, and the boys hit their foreheads in fright, turning around with bated breath. The menacing Yang Man loomed over them, her stern gaze piercing through them, and her voice filled with cold fury and authority. As punishment for their chatter, she ordered both of them to fire 1,000 arrows at a target, without accepting any excuses. Su Xiaoqiao clutched his head and groaned that firing 1,000 shots with a level 7 bow was too much for him, as he had barely mastered it. As she left, she coldly stated that they could only leave the hall after the training was completed, and her footsteps echoed in the silence. Su pleaded with Yang Man to soften the punishment, assuring him that they had realized their guilt and would not talk anymore, his tone full of remorse. Turning to the upset guy, Sen encouraged him, telling him not to whine because the woman was gone, and now he just needed to train. In desperation, the guy grabbed the hero by the hand and shouted that he didn't understand. They wouldn't let him go until they made 1,000 accurate hits. Hansen nodded understandingly and replied that they should begin then, since there was no time limit, and placed his hand on Su's shoulder, supporting him. He added that men needed to train to become stronger, and his voice sounded confident, inspiring the young archer. He knew that with his level 9 strength, the task would be easy, but for Su, 1,000 shots was a test that would temper his skill. A team of experienced archers passed by, discussing tomorrow's divine beast hunt, their voices full of anticipation. Su, turning around in surprise, did not know about the mission, and one of the warriors explained that the Son of God had found the beast and asked their squad to help. As Han drew his arrow, he thought that perhaps this hunt was why Qin Xuan had met with the Star River group. Commander Liu Hantao, noticing their conversation, sharply ordered them not to be distracted and to continue shooting, his voice thundering, demanding discipline. As the team retreated, Su quietly slipped a wad of money to Deputy Liu, begging him to help negotiate with Yang Man to ease their plight. But pushing the money away, he sternly declared that he did not take bribes, and looking skeptically at the young man, asked what kind of shooter he was. Pointing a finger at Hansen, Liu warned him that his pretty face wouldn't make him a marksman, and told him not to slack off in training. As he left, he said that they had to hit the target at least 1,000 times, otherwise they wouldn't be accepted into the squad. His voice was adamant. The Khan, watching him with a stern gaze, respected him in his heart for his integrity, although he was angry at his harsh demands. Su, cursing angrily, whispered to the hero that the deputy had previously taken bribes, and now he was tormented by the question of what had changed. He assumed that Liu had remembered Hansen and refused the bribe so as not to anger Yang, for whom he clearly had tender feelings. He also added that Liu learned of Yang Man's anger towards Hansen, so he made the task more difficult in order to please her and win her favor. Scratching his head, the guy wondered why he needed this drama, like in Santa Barbara, and why all the problems fell on him. Taking up his bow, he began shooting at targets, apologizing to Su for the troubles but asking her not to worry, promising to fix everything. Hansen, releasing the bowstring, hit the bull's eye and, smiling, promised Su that tomorrow they would go hunting for the divine beast together. The young man, his mouth open in amazement, did not expect that his friend, such a sharpshooter, would hit the target from 150 meters without the slightest miss. As he fired arrows one after another, he thought that this bow was easier to shoot with, as it was 2 levels lower than his strength. By firing 40 shots in a row, each one hitting the bull's eye, he demonstrated a mastery that left everyone in the room speechless. Su Xiaoqiao, shocked, didn't understand why the newbie hid such talent, because his accuracy was almost supernatural. The employees passing by, amazed by the young man's speed, whispered that this could really be the psycho from the square that the city was buzzing about. A crowd gathered behind him, discussing the guy's technique. He didn't change his hand, didn't get tired, and his movements seemed almost magical. One soldier, with envy in his eyes, muttered that there was nothing good in such talent, since people like him rarely reached the top. Han, noticing that Su was distracted, encouraged him, telling him not to waste time and to train so as not to fall behind the set rhythm. Inspired by Han Sen's speed, Su declared that if they got into the hunt, he would become his idol, his eyes shining with determination. Encouraging Su, the young man said that at their speed, they would finish by midnight if they believed in themselves and kept up their shooting pace. Yan Man, watching the training, thought that the archer was truly talented, and Qin made the right choice in trusting this young man. However, she was tormented by doubts about whether Khan would be able to get along with others, since his bright talent could cause envy in the close-knit squad. It seemed that Jan had a new favorite. She couldn't take her eyes off him, whose precision with a bow fascinated her like magic. The boys shot until dawn, firing over 2,000 arrows, their hands shaking, but the targets were strewn with accurate hits. Su, exhausted, collapsed to the floor, unable to feel his arms, but Han ordered him to urgently treat them so as not to miss the next training session. Overwhelmed with gratitude, he rushed to hug his friend, almost kissing him for his concern, his eyes shining with appreciation. The hero was worried about the hunt because they did not know what kind of divine beast they would face tomorrow, and this aroused anxiety. Raising his finger, Xiao boastfully declared that nothing could be hidden from him, and he had already found out all the details about tomorrow's mission. After a little flirtation with his assistant, he learned that their target would be a flying divine beast, which added intrigue to the upcoming hunt. The warrior, thinking, realized that hunting the flying divine beast would be incredibly difficult, requiring all their skill. Smiling, Su noted that few of the steel armorers knew how to shoot a bow accurately, which is why they turned to their squad for help. The young man, pondering the problem, came to the conclusion that flying beasts were difficult to hit with ordinary arrows and that special ones with Z-steel were needed. Z-steel, a metal superior to regular steel in strength and elasticity, and Han immediately decided to scour the internet to find suppliers. By adding even a small amount of Z-steel to an alloy, the characteristics of a weapon can be significantly enhanced, allowing it to strike targets with incredible force. His bow contains an alloy of 0.4% Z-steel, and his bowstring contains 0.5%, but striving for perfection, he decided to find arrows with an even higher content of this metal. While carefully studying the lots and characteristics of various metals, he was struck by the exorbitant prices for Z-steel, which made its acquisition a real challenge. After hours of searching, with Han's eyes growing tired from the flickering screen, he finally came across arrows that almost perfectly matched his requirements. Khan discovered an arrow with an impressive Z-steel content of 1.2% and wasted no time in contacting the seller, despite the staggering price of 300,000 apiece. Having agreed with the seller, Khan received a mysterious offer to meet in the ominous red light alley. The night butterflies, beckoning with graceful movements of their hands, made Khan, unaccustomed to such places, lower his head in embarrassment, but he resolutely walked towards the meeting place. He tried to convince the seller to send the arrow by mail to avoid a risky meeting, but all his attempts were in vain, and he had to go to the mysterious alley. Arriving at the alley, he noticed the door creak, and a man in a long, dark cloak, shrouded in shadows, silently beckoned him with his hand, inviting him to enter the semi-darkness. The mysterious man, looking the young man over, asked with a hint of mockery whether he really intended to buy the arrow, whose value and rarity could change the outcome of any battle. The stranger opened the box with a solemn gesture, revealing an arrow, and suggested that Khan first test it in action before paying the fabulous sum. Taking the arrow, he instantly felt its perfect balance, determining the center of gravity, and, admiring the skill, praised the work of the unknown blacksmith. Taking out his sharp blade, Khan cautiously asked if he could test the arrow by running the blade across it to ensure its strength and compliance with the stated specifications. Seeing the cutting steel blade in Khan's hands, the stranger nodded understandingly and agreed to the test, confident that the arrow would pass the test. He carefully ran the blade along the arrow, but even his sharp blade left no scratch, confirming that the Z steel composition in the arrow was significantly superior to his weapon. The arrow not only withstood the blade, but also damaged its edge, leaving the boy amazed at the incredible superiority of the Z steel. Looking closely at the arrow, Khan, delighted by its perfection, agreed to the deal, recognizing that this thing was a true work of art. The master proudly explained that the arrow was forged from the bearings of a star-class battleship, and that his handiwork, unlike machine-made consumer goods, was unmatched. After handing over the money and shaking the stranger's hand firmly, Sen admitted that he had initially been skeptical about the deal, but now trusted the master completely. As he left, the stranger said, "Come look for me if you need anything else," leaving the young man with the feeling that this meeting had opened the way to new opportunities in the world of rare weapons. The next day, several squads gathered in the shelter, ready to go into battle with the flying creatures. Noticing Khan, the commander turned to the Son of God with a slight grin, pointing to the young man and saying that this guy had also joined their squad for the upcoming hunt. A squad of archers, led by the fearless warrior Qin Xuan, confidently approached the warriors, radiating determination and readiness to fight the flying creatures. Shaking hands with Qin Xuan, the Son of God enthusiastically declared that this time victory must be theirs, and the warrior firmly confirmed that her archers would not fail. Approaching Han, Tianyang grabbed his hand tightly and mockingly asked since when the squad accepted people like him, clearly hinting at his unusual past and reputation. Hearing this, the girl looked angrily at Tianyang and reminded him that Han was her man, and his mockery only indicated problems with his head that he needed to urgently fix. The master, frowning, ordered Tianyang to be silent so that he would not dare to embarrass the warrior whose reputation and authority were unrivaled with his insolent words. Finally, Luo, unable to contain his venom, muttered that Han was a pathetic piece of trash hiding behind a woman's back, but his words only drew contemptuous glances from the warriors standing nearby. Young Xiao, approaching Han, noted with a grin that he was behaving like an inadequate person, whose empty threats and rudeness only emphasized his own weakness. Watching him go, the warrior calmly said that there was no need to worry. This guy only barks like a watchdog, but he wouldn't dare bite, fearing the consequences. From the high mountain, at the foot of which a river flowed, gently polishing the sharp stones, a majestic view opened up, inspiring the detachment before the upcoming hunt. The leader, confidently leading the squad to the foot of the mountain, solemnly announced that it was here that they would set up an ambush to deal a crushing blow to the flying creatures. Warrior Qin Xuan firmly ordered that some of the men be left at the foot of the mountain so that the archers could make stealthy shots while remaining unnoticed in the shadows of the rocks. Turning to Deputy Yang, the Son of God proudly declared that he had prepared 100 arrows containing Z steel for the archers, which would give them an advantage in the upcoming battle. Pointing his finger at Khan, he sternly ordered that arrows be distributed to all the archers except him, causing confusion in the squad and wary glances among the warriors. The surprised girl looked questioningly at the leader, asking why Khan was deprived of arrows and what was behind this strange decision, which clearly singled the young man out from the squad. The Son of God coldly replied that he did not give out arrows for free and had the right to decide who was worthy of using them, emphasizing his authority and inflexibility in this matter. Bowing her head, the woman acknowledged that the Son of God was in charge of the operation this time and had the right to dictate the terms, although her gaze betrayed slight dissatisfaction with his decision. Calling Liu Hongtao, the commander of the archers, she ordered that the best archers be given 20 of their own arrows, assuring them that they were in no way inferior to the star ones. Yang noticed that the hero clearly disliked Sen, avoiding her gaze, which hinted at a hidden dislike that could affect the success of the entire operation. Liu Hongtao shouted orders to the archers, demanding that they immediately take up ambush positions to catch the flying beast off guard and ensure victory. Turning to the boys, he contemptuously ordered them to hide in the bushes, declaring that they did not belong to the elite and were not worthy of standing in the front ranks. The Khan, clapping the young archer on the shoulder, told him with a grin not to pay attention to the barbs, as it was nothing, and suggested that he retreat while maintaining his composure. The young archer, seething with anger, was sure that Liu was deliberately making their task more difficult in order to humiliate Han and his supporters in front of the entire squad. He had long been a thorn in the side of the Son of God, and the prejudice against him did not surprise him, only fueling the young man's determination to prove his strength in the upcoming battle. The young man, looking at the hero, noted his calmness with curiosity, not understanding how he maintained his composure despite the obvious hostility from the squad leader. Inside, Khan was burning with anger, but he knew that to gain recognition, they would need to speak the language of strength, otherwise they would never be taken seriously in this harsh world. The Khan whispered that if they could kill the divine beast and steal its soul, the Son of God would regret his arrogance, and the victory would be their triumph. Su Xiaoqiao was puzzled and didn't understand how they could get ahead of the Son of God's men who had taken up positions on the opposite cliff, since they would be the first to shoot at the beast. Ordinary arrows couldn't harm a divine beast whose scales were stronger than steel, and the boy knew that only arrows with a high proportion of Z steel would give him a chance of victory. From behind the high cliffs came a terrifying roar that made the blood run cold, foreshadowing the appearance of a powerful creature ready to crush everything in its path. The young archer, trembling with fear, wondered what kind of monstrous sound was echoing in the mountains, and his heart sank with horror before the unknown enemy. Qin Xuan and the others, acting in a coordinated manner, lured the divine being out of the cave, trapping it where the archers had already taken up their positions. A purple dragon with shining scales burst out of the cave, and Yang, without wasting any time, commanded the archers to shoot strictly according to her orders, so that the strike would be accurate. The archers, who had taken up positions on the rocks, confirmed the order and, holding their breath, pulled their bowstrings, preparing to release a deadly volley at the mighty dragon. On command, hundreds of arrows, glittering with Z-steel, flew swiftly towards the soaring dragon, lighting up the sky with a deadly swarm aimed at its scales. The purple dragon, swift as lightning, dodged some of the arrows, and those that hit bounced off its impenetrable scales without causing any significant damage. The new attack proved more accurate, and many arrows reached their target, but the dragon's strong scales reflected them like a steel shield, leaving the archers in despair from the powerlessness of their weapons. The young archer gritted his teeth and realized the bitter truth. Even 1% Z-star arrows were powerless against the dragon's armor. The Khan, drawing his arrow, quietly explained that the attack was useless unless it hit the dragon's eye, and only an accurate shot could bring victory. Loading his new arrow, the archer placed all his hopes on its power, believing that it would pierce the scales and strike the dragon's heart, bringing the long-awaited victory. After listening to Han, Su Xiaoqiao realized that the attack was a diversion. The Son of God had gathered a crowd to lull the dragon's vigilance and prepare for the main attack. He, clutching a gleaming bow, rushed forward, deftly leaping over the archers to get into a better position for a decisive shot at the divine being. Chasing the dragon, he fired an arrow with determination, hoping to kill the beast with one shot, and his heart sank in anticipation, rushing after the flight of the projectile. The arrow pierced the dragon's wing, and scarlet blood spurted out, but the wound was not fatal, only enraging the beast, which continued to soar in the sky. The purple dragon roared in pain, baring its sharp fangs and sticking out its tongue, its eyes blazing with fury, promising retribution for the archer's brazen attack. Lowering his bow, Han Sen realized it was too early to shoot. His single arrow with 1 and 2% Z steel would have to wait until the dragon's defenses weakened. Despite its injured wing, the dragon could still fly, and ordinary arrows bounced off its scales without leaving even a scratch on its powerful body. Yanma, summoning her magical bow, swore with a furious cry that she would not let the Son of God take victory and loaded an arrow blazing with magical energy. Her arrow, like lightning, caught the dragon in the sky, causing a fiery explosion that lit up the cliffs and made everyone hold their breath in anticipation of the outcome. The warriors froze in amazement from the powerful explosion, but even after the arrows of Yang Ma and the Son of God, the purple dragon regenerated and continued to fly. Mounting a huge mount, the commander ordered his squad to pursue the wounded dragon, confident that with a damaged wing it would not fly far. The soldiers, some on foot, some on horseback, raced after the beast, trying not to miss the chance to deliver a decisive blow before the dragon had fully recovered its strength. Han and Xiao Qiao ran breathlessly after the detachment, regretting that all the mounts had been taken apart, and their legs could barely keep up with the rapid march. Fearlessly jumping over the rocks on the steep slope, the boys tried to catch up with the squad, but Xiao, losing hope, muttered that they wouldn't make it in time, even at the risk of breaking their legs. Suddenly, Qin Xuan's cry was heard as she leaped across the ravine on her mighty mount, calling out to Han to join her in the chase. Han, looking at Qin, admired her agility, wondering how she had so quickly overcome the path through the gorge, appearing like a whirlwind on her beast. The girl, confidently controlling her riding lion, extended her hand so that the young man could, in one jerk, climb onto the mighty beast, racing in pursuit of the dragon. The boy, gathering all his strength, made a swift leap forward, stretching out his hand to grab Qin's palm. Han reached out to Qin's hand, their fingers locking in a tight grip, as if cementing their resolve to defeat the dragon in this deadly chase. She deftly pulled the young man onto the back of her mighty lion mount, which, cutting through the wind, rushed forward, pursuing the purple dragon with uncontrollable fury. Xiao Qiao, lagging behind, screamed desperately, stretching out his hand and begging Lady Qin to take him with her, but the tiger was already carrying Sen and the warrior forward. Hugging the girl from behind, the hero, feeling her thin waist under the armor, became embarrassed by his thoughts, blushed, and immediately tried to drive them out of his head. The woman, sensing his awkwardness, sternly warned him not to raise his hands, explaining that she had only taken him for his shooting skills, and not out of affection. The guy smiled and asked for forgiveness, but in his heart he was sure that his charm did not leave her indifferent, despite her stern tone. The squad froze in front of a high, sheer cliff, wondering if they would be able to climb to the top where the dragon was hiding, or if they would have to find another way. Having caught up with the squad, Qin Xuan commandingly demanded that Yang Ma report the situation, ready to take command to turn the tide of the dragon hunt. Seeing Sen next to the warrior on the tiger, the Son of God flared with envy. His eyes sparkled with malice, betraying his hostility towards the impudent youth. Deputy Yang reported that the dragon had taken refuge on the top of the mountain, and even arrows with the beast's soul would not be able to reach it without climbing the cliff. Qin realized that without ascending to the top or bringing the dragon down, its regeneration would make victory impossible, and the squad would find itself in a hopeless situation. The Son of God, seething with impatience, ordered that brave men be found to drive the dragon down, where they could finish him off without risking their own skins. The warriors, crowded around the cliff, discussed how to climb it, doubting which of them would have the strength and courage to conquer the sheer stone walls. The enraged Son of God shouted at the soldiers, calling them useless, and promised everyone who climbed the mountain an extra piece of dragon meat. The warriors, fired up by the words of the reward, discussed how an additional portion of dragon genes would enhance their abilities, and this motivated them to perform a feat. The Khan, looking at the cunning man, thought with bitterness that he, as before, thoughtlessly risked the lives of others, covering up his cowardice with loud orders. Qin Xuan, turning to the Son of God, boldly offered to climb the mountain herself with a small group, assuring that the task was not as difficult as it seemed. The Son of God, avoiding danger, refused to climb up, declaring that his place was to command below, where he could control the progress of the entire operation. Pushing Han forward, the Son of God ordered him with a malicious grin to accompany Qin and protect her, clearly plotting something evil against the young man. They exchanged stern glances. The young man realized that there was a cunning plan behind the order, but retreating was not in his nature. The daredevils, armed with ropes, began to climb the sheer cliffs, clinging to the smallest ledges to reach the dragon's lair at the top. Han, climbing the rope behind Qin Xuan, tried not to look down, admiring her fearlessness, which inspired him to overcome the dangerous climb. At the top of the mountain, a purple dragon flapped its huge wings, raising thick clouds of dust, creating chaos and making it difficult for the warriors to aim their attacks. The warriors who reached the top desperately rushed at the dragon, swinging their blades, but the beast easily repelled their attacks, devouring the daredevils with terrifying fury. The warrior, having come close to the dragon's belly, fearlessly decided to take his blow on herself, protecting the squad and buying time for the archers. Without losing her composure, she ordered her men to take cover between the rocks and fire their bows, keeping a safe distance from the enraged dragon. The archers, hiding behind massive boulders, took out their bows, pulled the strings and prepared to release arrows, aiming at the purple beast's vulnerable spots. The dragon, using not only its fangs and claws, but also its long, spiked tail, crushed everything around it, turning the battle into a deadly game of survival. Khan, watching the battle from afar, saw that the dragon was weakened by its wounds, and drawing a bow and arrow made of Z steel, prepared to deliver the decisive shot. The archer, sensing that the moment had come, was confident that his arrow would pierce the dragon's scales, which would no longer be able to withstand such a powerful attack. The moment he took aim, he was distracted by a sudden noise behind him, causing his heart to stop with a premonition of a new danger that had crept up in the heat of battle. The Son of God, having activated the soul of the beast, transformed into a formidable warrior and swiftly moved towards Khan, his eyes burning with a thirst for reprisal against his opponent. The Khan, hiding behind a rock, hoped to remain unnoticed, but he felt fear grip his body as the Son of God inexorably approached him. The Son of God, with a furious roar, delivered a crushing blow, shattering the stone, and the warrior flew to the side, barely managing to dodge the deadly attack. The huge beast, in which the Son of God had been incarnated, roared with rage, cursing Khan and wishing that he would never return. The powerful blow sent the hero flying off the cliff, grabbing a rope at the last moment, which saved him from falling into the bottomless abyss beneath the mountain. Due to inertia, Khan hit the rock with great speed. Pain pierced his body, but he held tightly to the rope, fighting for his life at the decisive moment. He clenched his teeth, almost biting off his tongue, and felt his joints crack inside him, but the will to live forced him to hold on. As he tenaciously climbed the rope, he was glad that he had mastered the jade bone technique, which had kept his bones from breaking under such a brutal blow. Khan realized that the Son of God was burning with a thirst for his death, as he used the beast's soul to deliver a crushing blow, aiming to destroy the youth at any cost. The dragon found itself surrounded, on one side by the golden lion Qin Xuan, on the other by the Son of God, in the form of a huge, furious gorilla, ready to crush the beast. The archers, having taken up positions on the rocks, strengthened the defensive line, drawing their bows and preparing to release arrows to support the attack on the weakened dragon. The Khan wanted to embody his bloody beast, but the terrain did not allow it, forcing him to rely only on a bow and a single arrow. Focusing, he waited for the perfect moment, knowing that his precious arrow must not be wasted in this decisive battle with the dragon. The golden lion. Qin Xuan latched onto the dragon, tearing at its scales with its sharp claws and teeth, seeking to weaken the beast and open the way for a fatal blow. The fists of the gorilla, the incarnate Son of God, fell on the dragon's head like concrete slabs, shaking his skull with inhuman strength and fury. The purple dragon, despite its wounds, did not give up, fighting with redoubled ferocity, becoming even more dangerous, spewing out fury and agony on the top of the mountain. Interrupting the transformation, with a decisive cry she ordered everyone to attack, seeing that the dragon was on its last legs and victory was near if she struck now. Following her example, the Son of God interrupted the beast's incarnation and rushed to the attack, seeking to deliver the final blow and absorb the dragon's soul for his own power. Just as Qin and the Son of God's blades were about to reach the dragon, he flapped his wings, pushing them away and dodging the fatal blows at the last second. The warrior's weapons pierced the dragon's chest but became stuck in its scales, and its counterattack sent the heroes flying back from the powerful blow. The dragon's powerful counterattack was so strong that the warrior crashed into the rock, shattering it into rubble, and she herself received severe wounds, collapsing to the ground. Seeing her fall, Khan cried out her name in despair, his heart sinking with fear for the warrior who had risked everything to defeat the beast. The dragon, still full of strength, crawled to the edge of the cliff, preparing to fly to the other side to regenerate and restore its power in safety. The Khan, racing at incredible speed, pursued the dragon, realizing that if the beast flew away, he would never have a second chance to kill it. As he ran, he snatched his arrow from his quiver, determined that this time no one would stop him from firing the decisive shot. The Son of God, unwilling to give in, was one step away from attacking, summoning a magical bow and arrow, preparing, like the Khan, to strike the dragon in a final battle. At that very moment, he fired a powerful magical shot, burning with the desire to get ahead of his competitor and claim the glory of victory over the purple dragon. The dragon, standing on the edge of the cliff, spread his mighty wings, preparing to take off, his powerful flaps raising whirlwinds of dust, foreshadowing the final dash. The Khan, noticing the dragon's weak spot, realized with cold determination that it was now or never. The moment for the decisive shot had arrived. Like a true master, he pulled the bowstring to its limit and released the arrow, putting all his strength, experience, and hope for victory into the shot. Their arrows, fired simultaneously, flew almost level, but Sen's arrow, forged by a mysterious master, turned out to be faster and more accurate. The dragon did not have time to dodge Khan's swift attack. Its fate was sealed, and the fatal blow struck the beast, dooming it to fall. The purple dragon fell to the ground with a deafening roar, never taking off, and the archer felt a strange feeling, not understanding what it foreshadowed. Without taking his eyes off the defeated dragon, he asked himself if he had really done it, but his intuition told him that he would not be praised for it. The soldiers, stunned by Khan's actions, angrily cursed him, accusing him of meanness, believing that he had stolen the victory by shooting from the shadows like a rat. The Son of God, burning with rage, could not believe that the newcomer had outpaced his magical shot and delivered the fatal blow, taking away the glory of the dragon slayer. Qinxuan, having recovered from the blow, approached the scene of the battle and, stunned, could not believe that the young man had managed to land the decisive shot, killing the dragon. The Son of God, grabbing the confused Khan by the collar, furiously demanded an answer as to whether he had received the soul of the beast, his eyes blazing with anger and envy. The boy, unsure of what exactly he had received, replied in confusion that he did not have the soul of a beast, looking into the leader's menacing eyes to avoid conflict. Knowing that it was impossible to verify the presence of a soul, he decided to lie in order not to incur the wrath of the Son of God and to protect himself from trouble. Back at the hideout, Qinxuan called him into the office, sternly interrogating him to find out whether he had obtained the beast's soul or was lying to cover up the truth. Rubbing his aching cheek, Khan insisted that he only wanted to kill the dragon so that it wouldn't fly away and he wouldn't get his soul, trying to appear sincere. Qin, looking closely at the guy, tried to understand whether he was lying, but finding no evidence, decided that the beast's soul was not so easy to obtain. Resigned, she told the young man to forget this conversation and stay away from the Son of God, so as not to provoke him to new attacks. Han, breathing a sigh of relief, nodded to Qin, agreeing to avoid him so as not to inflame his anger and protect himself from new conflicts. Remembering how, after killing the dragon, the demigod, burning with rage, attacked him with his fists, Sen felt how the leader's anger almost cost him his life. Then the warrior, standing between them, protected the warrior, ready to risk her life to stop the enemy and end his attack. Activating her full power, she displayed incredible strength, causing the Son of God to retreat before her determination and skill. Returning to the city at night, where everyone was already asleep, Khan felt tired, but was full of joy from his secret triumph over the dragon. The first thing he did was take a shower, washing away the sweat and tension, enjoying the moment of peace after the battle and exulting in his secret. The warrior was glad that he had managed to secretly obtain the beast's soul, deceiving everyone, and now possessed a power that no one in the squad suspected. Having summoned the soul of the beast into his hands, he admired its radiant beauty, feeling how it filled him with strength and promised a great future. Remembering his shot, he rejoiced. The arrow not only killed the dragon, but also promised him wealth if he used his soul wisely. He understood that the beast's soul was one of the strongest in the sanctuary, and with it he could surpass many, even the most powerful warriors. Coming out of the shower, humming a cheerful melody, I was in a great mood, feeling triumphant and anticipating new victories. Looking at his copper-toothed wolf, the owner noticed a striking change, as if the beast had been transformed, radiating new strength and power unprecedented before. The wolf's fur took on a steely hue, and his eyes lit up with a bright green-yellow light, as if a spark of divine energy had blazed within them. Taking a closer look, the warrior realized that his wolf had reached the divine level, acquiring magnificent armor that shone with power and strength. Stroking the copper-toothed wolf's steel fur, he felt its strength, admiring the beauty of the beast, whose power promised great victories in the future. In just 3 months, the crystal had grown a divine soul, and Sen, after calculating, realized that in 5 years he would be able to surpass Qin Xuan and the Son of God. Taking out the dagger, he decided to eat the beast's meat to gain genes, and then buy a new pet and raise it to the divine level again.